Chapter 1282. Qian Qian. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Fight him. In Golden Light City, he broke the rules of the auction house and killed someone in front of Ning Hongxian. How could the next great emperor Ning Wu maintain his prestige? As the elder brother, Xianyuan Wuba not only did not punish him, but also acquiesced to Xianyuan Wuyao's actions. The experts sighed. As expected of his name, he was insufferably arrogant. It was as if there was no tyrant in the world in Xianyuan Wuba's eyes. He was the only one. Ning Hongshuan's expression was extremely ugly. He did not expect Xianyuan Wuyao to be so tough. Then again, if Xianyuan Wuba did not hand over the person, Ning Hongxian could not do anything to him. Kill him? It would definitely cause a war between the Ning Wu Empire and Nan Ao. The price would be too great. None of the three emperors could afford it. Taking 2 deep breaths, Ning Hongshuan's eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. He said with a straight face, "It's fine if you don't want to hand it over. I will not pursue Xianyuan Wuyao's mistake. However, the girl behind Xianyuan Wuying, shouldn't you give her freedom back?" Ning Hongxian was obviously referring to Xiao Han. At this moment, Ning Chaofan, who was far away, could not help but become more dignified. He looked over. His eldest brother's behavior today was indeed disappointing, but at least he kept his word. He finally helped his teacher and asked the Xianyuan family to hand over the person. "Haha, Ning Hongxian, what do you mean?" Xianyuan Wuba clasped his hands behind his back and turned to look at Xiao Han. He smiled as if nothing had happened and said, "That girl met my second brother by chance. The two of them fell in love with each other and fell in love with each other in just a few days, unable to extricate themselves. Not long after, she became the imperial concubine of the Xianyuan family. Why do you want me to give her freedom back?" In his words, Xiao Han was willing. How could love be forced? You're talking nonsense. Falling in love with each other and loving each other? Don't you know whether you controlled her or not? This time, even Ning Feiyang could not stand it anymore. Xianyuan Wuba was too shameless. "Ning Feiyang, you're a prince of Ning Wu royal family. Don't you feel ashamed of the Ning family?" Xianyuan Wuba shouted. Ning Feiyang didn't deserve to be a prince. He was simply a boorish villager. "Pay attention to your attitude." Ning Hongxian reprimanded him in a low voice. What he had said just now was indeed unbearable. Ning Feiyang's mouth twitched and he lowered his head. "Enough, I don't have time to listen to your nonsense. Since you didn't restrict her freedom, do you dare to take a few steps back and see what choice she has?" Qin Hao took a few more steps forward. He knew that letting Ning Hongxian settle this was equivalent to wasting time. Even if he argued with Xianyuan Wuba for decades, there would still be no conclusion. As for the members of the Xianyuan family, they retreated to see what Xiao Han would do. In reality, Qin Hao was taking a huge risk. Xiao Han was obviously under Xianyuan Wuying's control. Once he lost control and stepped back into the Xianyuan family's team, it would prove that Xianyuan Wuba was telling the truth. The two of them were indeed in love. However, Qin Hao trusted Xiao Han more. Just now, when he was talking about their past, he had already sensed that Xiao Han was showing signs of regaining her memories. At that moment, she must be fighting with all her might to break free from Xianyuan Wuying's control. Based on this, there was a great possibility that Han would regain her consciousness and come to his side. Qin Hao was gambling. "I think it'll work." In the Arhat Palace's camp, beside Luo Yuliang, a brawny man about 2 meters tall with bulging muscles and a frightening bronze skin spoke. This man was the leader of the Arhat Palace's team this time. He was the leader of the Arhat Palace's team, the head of the 9 halls, the hall master of the Luo Hall, and a true monarch stage powerhouse. He stroked his huge bald head and looked at Xianyuan Wuying with a smile. Since you're so confident, Xian Yuan Wuying, why don't you take a few steps back and let the girl choose for herself? Let's see who she will choose between you and the master of Dango. I'm looking forward to the result, ha ha. Xiao Han and Qin Hao were lovers. Although this matter was not completely publicized, it was already known by the powerhouses from all sides. As bystanders, the Sword Sect and the Arhat Palace. There were also a small number of powerhouses from the Fierce Sun Temple who despised Xian Yuan Wuying's style. However, no one could say anything on the surface. No one was stupid enough to provoke the Xian Yuan family openly. Therefore, they could only play the fool and take advantage of the situation. Even so, it was not difficult to see that Hall Master Iluo was already protecting Qin Hao. At this moment, Elder Meng and the others also nodded. Xian Yuan Wuying's brows furrowed. Of course, he did not think it was appropriate. When Qin Hao talked about their past, Xiao Han's consciousness was ignited, and she put up an unusually fierce resistance against the soul seal. She almost broke through the net and regained her memories. If he agreed with Qin Hao, even Xian Yuan Wuying, who had always been very proud of himself, would feel a little guilty. In his life, he had never seen a woman as unyielding as Xiao Han. Her consciousness was sealed, but she did not give up. When someone she cared about appeared, the other party would ignite the seed of hope with just a few words, and it would take root and sprout, breaking through the prison. Are you worthy to compete with my father? At this moment, behind Xian Yuan Wuying, an extremely handsome young man in his early 20s stood out. Xian Yuan Feng, Xian Yuan Wuying's son. He was the one who volunteered to fight Qin Hao because of Xian Yuan Wuji's setback. Who do you think you are? How dare you interrupt the conversation between the Shiliang Pavilion Master and the Crown Prince of Nanao? Xiaogua took a few steps forward and glared at him. You! Xian Yuan Feng's eyes widened and his anger surged. Fenger, back off, Xian Yuan Wuying said in a low voice. Then, he cupped his hands and bowed to Xian Yuan Wuba. Elder brother, I'm sorry to put you in a difficult position. You and I are brothers. You don't have to be so polite to me. Xian Yuan Wuba said. Nanao Emperor had many princes, and there were factions among them. However, Xian Yuan Wuba and Xian Yuan Wuying were born from the same mother, and they were both sons of the Empress. Although Xian Yuan Wuyao was not her biological son, he was adopted by the Empress from other concubines. He was raised by the Empress from a young age, and was equivalent to her third son. Therefore, as the elder brother, Xian Yuan Wuba took special care of Xian Yuan Wuying and Xian Yuan Wuyao. This was a treatment that the other princes envied but could not enjoy. Since we are brothers, of course, I can't put you in a difficult position. You have done enough for me. Next, please let me make my own decision. Xian Yuan Wuying pleaded. In Ningwu Empire, they had no home advantage. If Ning Hongxian really turned hostile, he would be a great threat to them. However, Xian Yuan Wuba did not lose his composure as an elder brother. In any case, he would not let his two brothers be bullied. Even if this was Ningwu Empire. Alright. Xian Yuan Wuba stepped back. There was no need for explanations between brothers. Next, Xian Yuan Wuying carefully observed Qin Hao. His slightly squinted eyes were like two sharp needles that pierced into Qin Hao's brain. He wanted to see what was in his head that he dared to openly challenge the Xian Yuan family. I can promise you. Unexpectedly, Xian Yuan Wuying agreed to Qin Hao's suggestion and let Xiao Han make his own decision. Everyone could not help but be surprised. Not only were the people from Sword Sect, Sacred Hall, and Arhat Palace stunned, but Xian Yuan Wuba and Xian Yuan Wuyao were also stunned. Of course, Qin Hao did not expect Xian Yuan Wuying to be so straightforward. He was afraid that Xian Yuan Wuying had ulterior motives and would not return the initiative to Xiao Han so easily. Father, you! Xian Yuan Feng said anxiously. Xian Yuan Wuying waved his hand to stop Xian Yuan Feng. He said to Qin Hao, I can promise you, but it does not mean that I am afraid of you. I just want to prove to everyone that Ling Xian and I are truly in love. Heaven and earth can be our witness." Ling Xian? Qin Hao murmured with a sarcastic sneer. Was this the name he gave to Xiao Han? What a terrible name! And then? Qin Hao asked. His eyes darted around as he quickly thought of a countermeasure. If Xian Yuanzhen dared to let Xiao Han out, Dendu would have lived in vain. There must be a backup plan behind this. Before Ling Xian makes her choice, shouldn't you also give an explanation to the people of the Xianyuan family? Xianyuan Wuying was furious. He turned around and shouted, "Xianyuan Wuji! Second uncle!" Xianyuan Wuji stepped forward helplessly. Sure enough, they want to expose Qin Hao's crime with the help of my broken arm. Of course, this was just to accuse him. In fact, Xianyuan Wuji's broken arm had nothing to do with Qin Hao. When Xianyuan Wuji stepped forward, Qin Hao's eyes fell on him. Xianyuan Wuji smiled faintly, but it was very forced. It could be seen that he was really helpless. It was as if his eyes were telling Qin Hao that he had no intention of going against him. Following this, everyone became curious as well. Why did Xianyuan Wuying pull out a junior? Moreover, this junior's sleeve was empty. He was a person with a broken arm. Could it be that this arm had been cut off by the master of Dangu? Many experts here did not know that Xianyuan Wuji had participated in the Emperor Martial competition. After all, these experts were the real big shots in their sect. Their cultivation was usually at the peak emperor level, half-step emperor level, or even the true emperor level. Normally, they only focused on cultivation and strived to reach the next level. Unless there was a major event in their sect or a grand event in the southern region, such as the auction held once every 5 years in the martial Ning Empire. Only then would these big shots show up. Therefore, they did not know Qin Hao's and Xiao Han's identities. They only knew that Qin Hao was the master of Dangu in western Liang, and Xiao Han might be a girl from a remote place. Then, Qin Hao and Xiao Han were lovers. They knew nothing else. Ning Hongxian and Ning Feiong were also among them. If they knew that Xiao Han was the beloved daughter of Emperor Xiao of Great Liao, and Qin Hao was the son-in-law of Emperor Xiao of Great Liao, perhaps they would be more resolute in their stand against the Xianyuan clan. Why did you call him out? Qin Hao glanced at Xianyuan Wuji indifferently. A loser in the southern region was just a passerby. In fact, if Xianyuan Wuji hadn't seen Qin Hao draw the power of heaven and earth and pull out the crimson arrow, he would have killed Xianyuan Wuji. Even Qin Hao had never thought of killing him. He killed him because he was worried that he would leak the secret of the crimson arrow to the Xianyuan family. But now it seemed that he didn't. Qin Hao also felt that Xianyuan Wuji's temperament had changed a lot. He was no longer as arrogant as before. Standing there, Xianyuan Wuji was like an idle person who stood aloof from worldly affairs. What do you mean? Do you need me to explain? According to what you said before, you defeated the people of the northern frontier, suppressed the people of the southern region, and drove away the people of the east continent. My Xianyuan family's disciple broke an arm in the battle. But he was not as good as others, so I can't say anything. However, I don't agree with you about suppressing the people of the southern region. Who did you suppress? Does he represent the entire southern region? Xianyuan Wuying snorted. Was he not convinced? Did he want to fight? Chapter 1283. Primordial Alchemy Venerate. All the experts were enlightened. It turned out that Xianyuan Wuji's arm was crippled by Qin Hao. It originated from a competition, a proper contest. A proper contest had many rules and restrictions. It was a complete test of one's strength. If one lost a battle and lost an arm, they could only blame themselves for being inferior. There was nothing to pursue. The martial Tao was filled with all kinds of challenges. Xianyuan Wuying also said that he would not pursue the matter, but Qin Hao's attitude displeased him. What did he mean by suppressing the southern region? All the experts present were from the southern region. Qin Hao's arrogant claim of suppressing the entire southern region was not only displeasing to Xianyuan Wuying, but also many people. Was there no one else who could praise the southern region? This was a slap to the southern region's face. Of course, the experts were only dissatisfied. In their opinion, perhaps Qin Hao had defeated a few juniors from the southern region. This included the severed arm descendant of the Xianyuan family. Therefore, he dared to claim that he was suppressing the southern region. In fact, the Xianyuan family descendant's talent was not bad. All the experts agreed on this point. However, it could not be said that it represented the entire southern region's standard. Blazing Sun Temple, Arhat Palace, Li family, Ning family, Sword Sect. Which one did not have their own geniuses? Even Chang Helou of the Spirit Beast Sect and Tang Xingchen of the Herbal Pill Hall might not be inferior to Xianyuan Wuji. However, these people could only be considered first-rate and could not be called the role models of the southern region. If Qin Hao had defeated Yu Qianyang of the Sacred Temple or Shou Wuk of the Sword Sect, then the seniors present might agree with Qin Hao's point of view and be worthy of the title of suppressing the southern region. After all, Yu Qianyang and Shou Wuk were the strongest among their peers. They were the flag-bearers of this generation of the southern region. As for defeating a descendant of the Xianyuan family, all the experts would never agree. If Pavilion Master Qin claimed that his alchemy skills were unparalleled among his peers, Old Man would not object. But isn't it a bit exaggerated to say that he's suppressing the southern region in terms of martial arts? Old Meng of the Sword Sect stroked his beard and smiled faintly. He looked at the extraordinary white-clothed figure among the disciples of the sect. His eyes were filled with admiration. Shou Wuk, Wuk Sword Sect's #1 inner disciple. He was a predetermined core disciple, and he was given the name Wuk by the Sword Sect's leader, the Sword Emperor. From this, one could see how monstrous his talent was. The two words, Wuk, were not only the name of the Sword Sect. It also told the world that Shou Wuk was flawless and had no flaws. In Senior Meng's eyes, only Shou Wuk from his sect was qualified to be the leader of the younger generation in the southern mountain range. Even Yu Qianyang, the saint of the sacred temple, was slightly inferior in comparison. It's not just exaggerated, it's simply arrogant. Yang Tai snorted. At the same time, he also looked at Yu Qianyang, who was surrounded by the disciples like stars surrounding the moon. He was just a descendant of the Xianyuan family. What was there to show off by defeating him? To put it bluntly, Xianyuan Wuji wouldn't even have a chance to struggle in front of Yu Qianyang. He would be completely crushed. If Qin Hao fought with Yu Qianyang from his sect, he would never dare to claim that he was the conqueror of the southern mountain range in his life. At the same time, Yu Qianyang's face was filled with disdain. He slowly said with contempt, "Pavilion Master Qin, as an alchemist, you should study alchemy diligently. As for martial arts, it's not your forte. Don't underestimate the southern mountain range just because you defeated a few small fries." There were two meanings in his word. First, he was looking down on Qin Hao. Second, he was insulting Xianyuan Wuji. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Small fries? Suppressing the son of the northern mountain range's warlord with one move and severely injuring Duan Ziju, he was just a small fries in Yu Qianyang's eyes. In an instant Yang Tai's face was filled with glory. As for the elders of the other forces, they just shook their heads and chuckled. They didn't refute, which was a tacit agreement. Xianyuan Wuba's face was cold. He didn't say anything. Yu Qianyang was arrogant, but he had the right to be. In all fairness, he was right. If Xianyuan Wuji fought with him, Xianyuan Wuji might not have the courage, just like when he faced the peerless genius of the East Continent. He would be completely crushed. Son of the saint, Wuji's talent is indeed not outstanding in the family. Because of his limited ability, he will only lose to me. Don't involve the entire Xianyuan family. I hope you remember this. Otherwise, even if I can't defeat you, I won't let you humiliate the Xianyuan family. Xianyuan Wuji clenched his fist. His eyes became extremely sharp. He no longer looked dispirited. Endless battle intent surged from his body. He said, "Besides, don't judge someone you've never fought with your good judgment. Maybe they are stronger than you. At that time, you will feel even more ashamed." Boom. Everyone was shocked. Xianyuan Wubao was also amazed by this scene. How could Xianyuan Wuji become so sharp all of a sudden? After coming back from North Border, Xianyuan Wuji was muddle-headed like a walking cork. No matter how hard he tried to persuade him, it was useless. He was addicted to drinking and degenerated. On the contrary, because of Yu Qianyang's words, his courage was ignited. Could it be? Wuji has never been depressed. Qin Hao was also surprised. He could see that Yu Qianyang did have some ability. He couldn't guarantee that Yu Qianyang's ability was stronger than Zhou Wudao's, but it shouldn't be much worse. Previously, when facing Zhou Wudao, Xianyuan Wuji did something shameful. He knelt down in public. He even asked Qin Hao to kneel down with him, claiming that it was his honor. Now, when facing an opponent of the same level, Yu Qianyang, who was not much worse than Zhou Wudao, acted so responsibly. Xianyuan Wuji's heart was filled with a flame of fighting spirit. The last two words were even a provocation, as if he didn't think that Yu Qianyang was strong. It seems that what happened in the north has baptized Xianyuan Wuji's martial heart, making him sublimate. Qin Hao thought. At this moment, it was enough to see the change in the other party. Wuji, back off, Xianyuan Wuying said with a gratified face. Finally, this junior of the family didn't fall into a state of despair after the setback. However, his purpose this time was not to compete with the Scorching Sun Temple, but to target Qin Hao. Trash, don't you feel ashamed? Xianyuan Feng shouted with a sullen face. Xianyuan Wuji's talent was far inferior to his. Even he didn't dare to face Yu Qianyang, but this trash who had one arm chopped off dared to challenge the holy son of the Scorching Sun Temple. He was getting bolder and bolder. Hearing the word trash, Xianyuan Wuji's body trembled and he sighed silently. Instantly, his fighting spirit disappeared, and he turned back into a person with dim eyes. He lowered his head and walked back to the back of the team. However, his words just now were sincere. Although he didn't fight with Qin Hao in the Emperor Martial competition, when Qin Hao fought with Zhou Wudao, he was in danger several times, but he always counterattacked. In the end, his arrow pierced through Zhou Wudao's soul, scaring the geniuses of the East Continent away. They didn't even dare to come back to take the competition prizes. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Just based on this point, he completely acknowledged Qin Hao. Even if they didn't fight, he would still lose to him. But even if he lost, he was convinced. And Yu Qianyang wasn't much stronger than Zhou Wudao. He might even be weaker. How could he look down on the champion of the Emperor Martial competition? At this moment, Xianyuan Wuji really wanted to see Qin Hao teach the Holy Sun a lesson. You don't deserve to talk to me. Yu Qianyang threw a faint glance at Xianyuan Wuji. Look at that dejected back. What's his status in Xianyuan clan? He could barely squeeze into the top class. Not to mention him, even Xianyuan Feng didn't deserve to face him. In the entire Xianyuan clan, only Xianyuan Wuba's youngest son was qualified to fight with Yu Qianyang. Of course, the one who would lose would definitely not be him. Wuji only said to protect the Xianyuan clan. He doesn't want to compete with the Holy Sun. Xianyuan Wuying smiled and nodded at Yang Tai. Yang Tai smiled gently. Of course, he thought so because Xianyuan Wuji was not qualified to compete with Yu Qianyang. Senior, you don't need to explain. I won't bicker with him. The Xianyuan royal family has a noble bloodline and can control gravity. There are many geniuses in the family. Today, Xianyuan Feng is here. However, Senior Wuba's youngest son is even more skilled. Even Qianyang admires him very much. Yu Qianyue replied indifferently, as if he was giving advice. His words showed that he was giving face to the Xianyuan clan. Then, he glanced at Qin Hao and said, Pavilion Master Qin might be too obsessed with alchemy. He has some achievements in alchemy and thinks that his martial arts are equally profound. But he spends all his time refining pills and rarely has the chance to see real geniuses. That's why he said those arrogant words. Senior Wuying, please don't bicker with him. Xianyuan Wuying smiled and nodded. Of course I won't bicker with him. After all, he's only an alchemist. He might win by luck if he fought with Wuji. However, since he said that he could suppress the entire southern region, he must have some ability. I want to see his ability and see if he's worthy of Ling Xian. If he's really good, I'm willing to let Ling Xian stand out and let her choose someone better. This is also for her happiness and future. Sigh. Xianyuan Wuying sighed with a sense of righteousness. I see. Everyone understood. This was to test Qin Hao's talent. Only when Qin Hao showed ability that he recognized, Xianyuan Wuying would let Xiao Han go. If not, he wouldn't. This was something that no one could refuse. Senior is already a peak Emperor stage powerhouse. Between him and Senior, of course Senior's talent is stronger and more suitable for Miss Ling Xian. After all, no one can say for sure how far he can go in the future. However, it doesn't prevent everyone from witnessing his ability. Although, maybe he's not that great. Yu Qianyang smiled. At this time, Xiaogua and the others were already full of anger. They glared at the holy son of the sacred temple. This person was trampling on Big Brother and raising his status. Qin Hao glanced coldly at Yu Qianyang and ignored him. Instead, he said to Xianyuan Wuying, How do you prove it? Xianyuan Wuying's lips curled into a smile. He stretched out his right palm and said, Take my palm. If you don't die, you'll be qualified to stand in front of Ling Xian and let her choose someone better between you and me. No. Imperial trainer Dan Gu growled angrily. He took a big step forward and stood firmly in front of Qin Hao. This time, no matter what, he would not indulge Qin Hao. There was a price to pay for arrogance. End of chapter. Chapter 1284. A peak monarch who had just glimpsed the laws of the Emperor intent. He was going up against a Yuan Venerate, the lowest of the lower Yuan Venerate. Everyone was astonished. Although it was only one palm, the difference in strength between the two was like heaven and earth. Xianyuan Wuying was basically trying to kill him. This wasn't fair at all. Of course, I won't use my full strength. I will only use 10% of my strength in this palm, lest everyone says that I bully the weak. If you can take it, you will be qualified to stand in front of Ling Xian. If not, there is no need to talk about it. I hope you are not a coward. If not, even I feel that it is not worth it for Ling Xian. Xianyuan Wuying stood with his hands behind his back. He claimed that he would only use 10% of his strength, but his whole body exuded a strong oppressive force. Big Brother, don't agree with him. Xiaogua said anxiously. 10% of his strength is also the power of a peak monarch. Xianyuan Wuying has just comprehended the laws of the Emperor intent. How terrifying is his palm. Brother-in-law, don't be fooled by him. His goal is to kill you. Shameless to the extreme. Pavilion Master, please reconsider. Pavilion Master, please reconsider. Dan Ji's members pleaded anxiously. No wonder Xianyuan Wuying had agreed so readily. It turned out that he didn't want to give Qin Hao a chance. He wanted to kill him with one palm strike. If Qin Hao died, there would be no such chance. Little friend, although I don't know how capable you are, I can guarantee that you won't be able to take this palm strike, Qin Lao said. They had also just glimpsed the Emperor intent, so he knew how terrifying this level was. Xianyuan Wuying obviously didn't have as deep an understanding of the emperor intent as Qing Lao. After all, he wasn't a half-step Yuan arch. However, killing Qin Hao would be like squashing an ant. Even 10% of his strength was more than enough. Even the person you admire has spoken. Do as you see fit. The imperial censor stepped aside. He knew in his heart that he couldn't persuade Qin Hao. If Dendi really wanted to do it, no one in the world could stop him. However, Duanmu Qinghui had spoken. His analysis of the martial path was more important than the imperial censors. Qin Hao smiled bitterly. How could he not know that he would not be able to withstand this palm strike? The gap between the exalted realm and the peak of the emperor realm was too great. It wasn't something that cultivation methods, treasures, or so-called trump cards could make up for. If they were at the same cultivation level, there might not be much difference between them. Of course, whoever cultivated a higher-level cultivation method or had a higher-level treasure would be stronger. They could even surpass levels to kill their enemies. However, in the face of absolute power, all the so-called cultivation methods and magical treasures were nothing. Even if Qin Hao had activated the Golden Bell protection and burned his dragon's strength to the limit, this palm was enough to take his life. Qin Hao took a step forward and stared at Xianyuan Wuying with his deep eyes. With a mocking smile, he said, "If you want to kill me, just do it. Why do you have to be so secretive? Are the next generation of the Xianyuan clan all people who hide their heads and show their tails? If you don't dare, then you don't dare. It's just a palm strike. I thought Master Dan Gu was very capable. How dare such a coward claim to be able to suppress the southern region? How dare he stand in front of Miss Ling Xian and compete with my father?" Xianyuan Feng laughed. "Just a palm strike. Why don't you try to take on old man's?" Qing Lao leaned forward slightly. His usually amiable face became very serious. The faintly forming Emperor Realm aura slowly spread out. His eyes were so bright that no one dared to look directly at them. Besides, Old Man only used half of his strength. "You!" Xianyuan Feng didn't dare reply. Did he dare? Of course not. Although it was only a palm strike, and only half of his strength, Old Man Duanmu's cultivation was still above Xianyuan Wuying's. He was a true half-step Emperor Realm cultivator. If Xianyuan Feng dared to step forward, he would only be courting death. Xianyuan Wuying's expression turned ugly at this moment. Master Dan Gu didn't dare to take his palm strike, and his son mocked him. However, now that Old Man Duanmu had declared that his son would take on half of his strength, Xianyuan Feng immediately shut his mouth. What did this mean? Xianyuan Feng was even worse than Qin Hao. He couldn't even take on half of his strength. "Duanmu Qinghui, you have repeatedly challenged my limit. Do you really think that I won't dare to touch you in the Ningwu Empire?" Xianyuan Wuba stepped forward. A strong Emperor Realm aura bloomed. His body circulated with a platinum luster. This luster was several times stronger than when Qing Lao attacked. It was the power of Emperor Realm intent, and this power seemed to act on Qing Lao out of thin air. In an instant, Qing Lao felt the power of the Great Path descending from above his head. It was as heavy as Mount Tai. The space around him was crushed by this power. Almost everyone could hear the sound of bones grinding. Qing Lao's body faintly rose. He must be bearing the suppression power of the other party. Gravity law, Brother Hui. Master Gu clenched his fists nervously. In this situation, as a high-level origin emperor, he was not qualified to intervene. There is no one in 10,000 laws. I am the only one. Emperor Realm Intent Law, refine. Qing Lao's eyes were solemn as he muttered. Suddenly, a thin platinum luster bloomed on his body. It surrounded his body and resisted Xianyuan Wuba's increasing pressure. And this power also belonged to Qing Lao's law, the so-called Emperor Realm Intent he had comprehended. Refine. At this moment, as he blurted out, the thin luster circulating on his body gradually merged into Xianyuan Wuba's gravity law. It seemed to turn into billions of particles that merged with the gravity law. They permeated each other and then assimilated. Whoosh! An invisible force dispersed around Qing Lao. At this moment, the pressure of gravity he was under was completely refined and dissipated. And faintly, it seemed that Qing Lao's aura had inexplicably become stronger. Refining law? A powerful elder from the sword sect walked out. His aura was far above Elder Meng's. He was obviously a true Emperor Realm Almighty. He looked at Duanmu Qinghui in surprise. Refining law was rare, and the effect seemed to be very domineering. It had actually refined Xianyuan Wuba's law. Incomparably wonderful. I have never seen such a law before, Yang Tai said with a trace of envy in his eyes. Looking at it this way, the refining law was the Emperor Realm intent that Duanmu Qinghui had comprehended. After releasing it, it could refine other people's Emperor Realm intent. It was very compatible with the profession of an alchemist, and since he could refine gravity, he could naturally refine the Sacred Hall's fire law. This was very powerful. In the future, when Duanmu Qinghui matured and completely comprehended the refining law, he would definitely be a terrifying person. At this moment, Master Tang's eyes were filled with anger, desire, and even hatred. All sorts of emotions were revealed without concealment. His expression was somewhat ferocious as he glared at Qing Lao. He really wished he could replace this person. Xianyuan Wuba was surprised. However, he still didn't place Qing Lao in his eyes. The law power he had released was very weak. He hadn't fully released his Emperor Realm intent. After all, he really couldn't kill Duanmu Qinghui here. He only wanted to teach him a lesson so that he wouldn't blindly come out and stand up for Qin Hao. But he didn't expect that not only did he not achieve the effect of teaching Duanmu Qinghui a lesson, but he also seemed to have unexpectedly helped Duanmu Qinghui. Many thanks. Qing Lao smiled faintly. In that instant of Emperor Realm intent collision, the law power that Xianyuan Wuba had released just happened to be within his tolerance range. He had used this opportunity to counterattack with his Emperor Realm intent, allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of the refining law. Thus, he was able to use it more skillfully. And this situation had undoubtedly pushed him one step closer to the true Emperor Realm. You're welcome, Xianyuan Wuba said coldly. Next time you won't be so lucky. Ah. Hall Master Iluo slapped his big bald head and laughed without restraint. How interesting. Xianyuan Wuing, you father and son wanted to embarrass the master of Dangu. In the end, you came out to embarrass yourself. Xianyuan Wuba taught Great Elder Duanmu a lesson and helped him take another step towards the Emperor Realm. When will you help me too? Let me fall into the law of gravity. I really want that. In the Arhat Palace, from the Palace Masters and Palace Elders to the 9 Hall Masters, as well as the disciples, they all lived by refining their bodies. In order to refine their bodies, they dared to try anything dangerous. Using gravity to crush the body and bones was exactly the basic training method of the outer sect disciples. It could be said that in the southern region, who was the most effective against the Xianyuan family, the Arhat Palace was second to none. Their training method was completely masochistic, and the ultimate move of the Xianyuan family was the tonic that the disciples of the Arhat Palace dreamed of. There was even a rumor that one night, the Arhat Palace master could not find a way to train himself. He could no longer improve, so he ran to Nanao and found the current Great Emperor Nanao, who was Xianyuan Wuba's father, and asked him to use the most terrifying killer move, the 9-star dilly, to train himself. Great Emperor Nanao was so angry that he spat out blood. Their family's ultimate move was used to kill enemies. It was their pride, but in the eyes of the Arhat Palace master, it was a tool to train himself. After that, some people said that the Arhat Palace master was badly beaten that night. Half of his bones were crushed and his face was swollen. When he got home, even his son, Luo Yuliang, could not recognize him. As for great Emperor Nanao, it was even more serious. He did not go out for a year. It was said that he slept for more than 5 months, and when he woke up, he recuperated for another 3 months. He was obviously exhausted. However, after that battle, Hall Master Luo was once again brimming with energy and vigor in the 2nd month. Furthermore, in terms of cultivation, he had truly improved a lot. It gave him the misconception that his body had become a god. After that, he publicly advised his disciples that if they met anyone from the Xianyuan family in the future, as long as their realm was not too different, they must ask nicely. Even if they had to kneel down, they must ask for a beating. This incident became the laughing stock of the southern region. Of course, the Arhat Palace was not the one that was laughed at. Hearing Palace Master Luo's mocking laughter, Xianyuan Wuba looked embarrassed for the first time. He gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. His face was full of grievances. He knew very well that even if he used all his strength and used the law of gravity, it would not have much effect on Palace Master Luo. What worried him was that it might cause Palace Master Luo to level up. This was the reason why the Xianyuan family was most afraid of the Arhat Palace. Therefore, they would never attack anyone from the Arhat Palace. Enough. Since it is not convenient for my father to show up, I will take his place and see what Pavilion Master Qin can do. If he wins, the Xianyuan family will agree to his request and give him a chance. Xianyuan Feng could not tolerate these thick-skinned barbarians from the Arhat Palace. The southern region was beautiful. How could such a group of perverts be born? They used the Xianyuan family's powerful cultivation method to stimulate their own improvement. A killing move that was fatal to others was the best tonic for the disciples of the Arhat Palace. It was too disgusting. Xianyuan Feng stood up. His words successfully diverted everyone's attention. He no longer made the disciples of the Sword faction and the disciples of the Sacred Halls show strange expressions that annoyed them. He wanted to challenge Qin Hao and defeat the Master of Dangu to win back the dignity of the Xianyuan family. Chapter 1285. Translator. Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. Let's go together. The scene quieted down. The experts looked at each other. Although they didn't say anything, they were communicating with their eyes. Xianyuan Feng was a direct descendant of the southern proud royal family. He had a high status in the family, and his talent was among the best among the younger generation. In fact, he could even be considered as one of the top geniuses of his generation in the southern region. Xianyuan Wuji, a branch disciple, couldn't compare with him. Now, he was representing his father to fight against the Master of Dangu. In terms of age, the Xianyuan family didn't intend to bully him. They were very fair. Now, all that was left was to see whether or not Qin Hao agreed. This was a good opportunity for the various powerhouses to see whether or not the Pill Pavilion Master had the qualifications to suppress the southern domain. Of course, even if Qin Hao defeated Xianyuan Feng, it didn't mean that he could trample the entire southern region under his feet. After all, Shou Wuk and Yu Qianyang were the strongest among the younger generation in the southern region. However, even if it was Xianyuan Feng, it wouldn't be easy for Qin Hao to defeat him. At this moment, Xianyuan Wuji stared ahead. He had heard from Xianyuan Feng that he wanted to experience Qin Hao's ability and teach him a lesson. Now that he had the chance, he dared to fight. Actually, before the battle started, Xianyuan Wuji already knew the answer. Without a doubt, Xianyuan Feng would definitely be defeated. The genius of the eastern continent, Zhou Wudao, also chose to avoid Qin Hao. The difference between Xianyuan Feng and Zhou Wudao was not small. If they were to fight, not only would Xianyuan Feng be defeated, he might even be crushed by Qin Hao. Xianyuan Wuji wanted to remind him, but in the end, he shook his head and could only watch quietly from the side. He wanted to see a dazzling genius of his family humiliate himself. He was a branch disciple, and in the eyes of the direct descendant, he was insignificant. Xianyuan Feng, as the direct descendant of the imperial family, wouldn't take him seriously? Just like how he called him trash, Xianyuan Feng didn't care about Xianyuan Wuji's feelings. Even if he tried to persuade him, Xianyuan Feng wouldn't listen. Xianyuan Feng would even think that he was looking down on him, and that would only make Xianyuan Wuji's situation worse. Therefore, he could only watch Xianyuan Feng. How is it? Do you dare or not? Xianyuan Feng took another step forward as a torrential battle intent surged out from his body. At this moment, he was like a monster thirsting for war, eager to tear Qin Hao apart. Qin Hao still ignored him. He smiled, cupped his hands, and faced the various experts present. He said in a refined and courteous manner, "I am an alchemist with mediocre talent and a weak cultivation base. I know that I am not a match for the pure martial geniuses of the southern region. However, as Dan Ji's master, he had the responsibility to protect Dan Ji's face. I accept this challenge." The cultivators from all sides smiled. Pavilion Master Shi Liang was indeed humble. However, no one thought that Qin Hao was wrong. In terms of alchemy, no one present could suppress him. Not to mention Tang Xingqian, in terms of alchemy theory, even Master Tang or Duanmu Qinghui of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance wouldn't have the confidence to suppress Qin Hao. This young Pavilion Master's talent in alchemy was too monstrous. The Saint's Soul Elixir was the best proof. But if it was in terms of pure martial Tao, then perhaps Qin Hao really couldn't be ranked in the southern territory that was filled with heroes. So, even if he lost to Xianyuan Feng in this battle, it wasn't an unjust loss. Young Pavilion Master, you are too modest. Just give it your all. Even if you lose, no one in the southern region will say anything bad about Dan Go. Alchemists are not good at fighting. I think all of you have the same idea as Old Man. Elder Meng of the Sword Sect said with a smile as he looked at the people around him. He had a good impression of Qin Hao. This young man was sensible, knew how to retreat, and had the demeanor of a leader. The other cultivators also nodded. Elder Meng was right. Well, in that case, I would like to be bold and ask all of you to be witnesses. If I lose, I will withdraw and apologize to Xianyuan Wuying and the entire Xianyuan family. However, if I win, I hope all of you can be my guarantor and ask the Xianyuan family to keep their word and let Ling Xian step forward. Qin Hao's eyes shone with an intelligent light. Fight? Sure. As long as the Xianyuan family admitted to it, Qin Hao could defeat all the younger generations of the Xianyuan family in one go. However, if Xianyuan Wuba did not admit to it, this battle with Xianyuan Feng would be meaningless. Therefore, Qin Hao wanted the other elders of the 3 sovereigns and 4 sects to be his witnesses. If Xianyuan Wuba dared to go back on his word, all the cultivators present would not forgive him. Sure. Elder Meng said. Elder Meng's cultivation was similar to Qing Lao's. He was half a step away from becoming an emperor. Naturally, he had enough weight in the sword sect. I am willing to be your witness. Hall Master Iluo stepped forward and secretly glared at Xianyuan Wuba. His eyes were filled with the desire to fight. I can be your witness, the Crown Prince of Bao Li Yaxu said. He emitted his emperor's aura and was full of majesty. I can be your witness. Ning Hongdao stepped forward. Old Man can be your witness. I can be your witness. I can be your witness. At this moment, more than 20 powerful seniors of the southern region spoke. Even the weakest of them was no weaker than Xianyuan Wuying. They went out together and were under great pressure. Xianyuan Wuba frowned and thought to himself, Qin Hao is really good at scheming. He actually incited so many cultivators to join him. It would be good if Xianyuan Feng won. However, if he lost, the consequences would be difficult to deal with. Kill him. Xianyuan Wuying's expression was very ugly. He secretly sent a message to his son. Then, he flung his sleeves and stepped back into the family team. He naturally did not doubt his son's ability. There were not many people in the family who could suppress Xianyuan Feng. Xianyuan Feng was not like Shouwuk, who could become a role model for the cultivators of this era. However, in the southern region, he could squeeze into the ranks of the first-class geniuses. Even though Qin Hao had defeated Xianyuan Wuji, there was a big gap between Xianyuan Wuji and Xianyuan Feng. In this battle, he, the master of Dangu, would lose his life. Xianyuan Feng's lips curled into a cold smile. Even if his father did not send a message, he would not let Qin Hao live. Today, Shiliang Pavilion Master would become a springboard for Xianyuan Feng to become famous. He only needed one battle to shake the entire southern region. Please! Xianyuan Feng waved his hand and pointed to the auction stage. Now that the auction ceremony was over, the auction stage was very big. It was very dazzling to stand on it and was most suitable for battle. Please! Qin Hao said in a cold tone and stepped onto the stage. At this moment, the atmosphere at the scene was slightly suffocating. Although it was a battle between two juniors, the emperors present inexplicably felt a sense of anticipation, which made their hearts that had been silent for many years excited. At their level, they rarely fought with others. Most of them had not fought with anyone in hundreds of years. A battle between emperors was too terrifying. Regardless of which one of them won, it would cause a great impact and destruction to the southern region and cause great suffering and suffering. Today they would see a battle between two geniuses or even a battle between two professions. Alchemy versus martialists. Perhaps they would not be interested in a battle between ordinary people. However, today was different. On the surface, this was a battle between Qin Hao and the Xianyuan family. However, on a deeper level, it was a battle between Shiliang and the southern region. Shiliang had not produced any emperors for many years. No one knew how strong the martialists of this generation of Shiliang martialists would be and how huge the gap between them and the southern region would be. Everyone was really curious and excited. Xianyuan Feng, 27 years old, mid-stage level 8 Yuan Venerate, possesses a source spirit. Xianyuan Feng took the initiative to speak as the two of them stood still on the stage. Even if he wanted to kill his opponent, he had to leave a good impression on the elders present and not lose his bearing as a member of the Xianyuan family. Qin Hao, 21 years old, early stage level 3 Yuan Venerate, possesses a source spirit. Qin Hao also saluted. Many of the people present shook their heads. The gap between them was really too great. There was already a huge gap between a level 3 Yuan Venerate and a level 8 Yuan Venerate. However, Xianyuan Feng also possessed a source spirit. If he unleashed his full power, he would most likely be able to contend with a second-level monarch. Fortunately, the Shiliang Pavilion Master also possessed a source spirit. Hopefully, his source spirit would be a little stronger. Otherwise, this battle would be lackluster. If he was defeated by Xianyuan Feng in one move, he would have failed to live up to the expectations of these powerhouses. Not only were the elders shaking their heads, but even many of the disciples were looking at him with disdain. The Shiliang Pavilion Master was really too weak. Within the 3 sovereigns and 4 sects, most of the disciples of the first-rate sect were much stronger than Qin Hao. Shiliang was indeed the worst of the 4 regions. However, Xiaogua, Nibbling Tube, and the others were laughing. A mere level 8 Yuan Venerate actually dared to challenge the little ancestor? It seemed like this battle wasn't anything special. Even if this genius of the Xianyuan family possessed a source spirit, it would still be very difficult for him to force Qin Hao to use his full power. Once the little ancestor's 3 spiritual souls were unleashed, he would be able to surpass 1.5 heavenly cycles in order to attack his opponent. The might of this attack was no joke. In the southern region, where many outstanding people lived, few people would be able to contend against him. Xiaogua and the others weren't the only ones laughing. Even Ning Chaofan, who was in the distance, was laughing. He actually sat down, grabbed the melon seeds on his seat, and started munching on them. Then, he crossed his legs and said, "The Xianyuan family doesn't know what's good for them. During the battle, you are not allowed to rely on any magic tools, weapons, or defensive tools other than your soul. Both sides will stop when necessary. If either side loses the ability to fight or admits defeat, the battle will be over. More importantly, outsiders are not allowed to interfere. Otherwise, you will bear the consequences. Let's begin." Since they were on the auction stage, the person presiding over the rules was the auctioneer, Li Beitong. No one had any objections to this. The last rule that Li Beitong had set was obviously targeted at Xianyuan Wuba. If the emperor-level Xianyuan Wuba suddenly interfered, it would be very disadvantageous for Qin Hao. Now that this rule had been set, it would be difficult for Xianyuan Wuba to act. Among the powerhouses present, which one of them wasn't at the peak of the monarch stage, half-step to the Yuan emperor stage, or even the real emperor level. Even if Xianyuan Wuba secretly made a move, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape everyone's eyes. At this moment, as Li Beitong announced the start of the battle, the purple aura of supremacy bloomed on Qin Hao and Xianyuan Feng at the same time. Obviously, Qin Hao's aura was weak, while Xianyuan Feng's aura was extremely strong. Both of them circulated their cultivation techniques and were about to collide. "Wait a minute." Suddenly, an unexpected voice broke the atmosphere of the battle, startling everyone. Then, the powerhouses from all sides looked at the person who spoke with displeasure. Who was so blind as to stop the battle at this moment? Countless gazes couldn't help but look in the direction of the spirit beast sect that was being ignored. It was the chief disciple of the sect leader, Chang Hello. At this moment, Chang Hello faced the sharp gazes of the powerhouses from all sides and walked over timidly. He stopped below the battle arena. He didn't have the boldness of Qin Hao. After all, Qin Hao was Dendi in his previous life. "What do you want?" Elder Meng of the Sword Sect asked. His voice was like a sword that pierced Chang Helo's heart. He was just a disciple of a mere first-rate force. If he couldn't give a satisfactory explanation for disturbing everyone's mood, Chang Helo's fate would be very miserable. "Hello, Elder Meng. I'm a disciple of the Spirit Beast sect. My master is." "Old man asked you what you want?" "He didn't ask who your master is." Elder Meng's tone was stern. Of course, he knew that Chang Helo was a disciple of the Spirit Beast sect. He also knew whose disciple he was. However, he only wanted to watch the battle. He wanted to see if Qin Hao, the little pavilion lord, was worthy of suppressing the southern region. As for Chang Helo's master, it was none of Elder Meng's business. "Elder Meng, it's like this. Earlier, Pavilion Lord Dan Gu claimed that he was suppressing the southern region. As a member of the southern region, I'm not convinced and want to fight with him." Chang Helo replied cautiously. Facing a half-step sword sovereign was too terrifying. Every word that came out of Elder Meng's mouth was like a sharp sword that pierced into his heart. He felt very uncomfortable. Elder Meng squinted his serious eyes. A disciple of the Spirit Beast sect actually wanted to fight. Moreover, the reason given was very good. Chang Helo said. However, he was not convinced that Qin Hao was suppressing the southern region. Therefore, he did not mention the private matter between Dan Gu and the Xianyuan family. As a member of the southern region, the Spirit Beast sect was indeed qualified to fight. However, if he went on the stage, it would definitely exhaust Qin Hao. Whether he agreed or not, it was up to Qin Hao. At this moment, Elder Meng's eyes looked towards the stage. Obviously, he respected Qin Hao enough. "Sure," Qin Hao replied. Chang Helo had a conflict with him yesterday in the Wenhua garden, which made him lose face. Today, he didn't get a single item from the auction. He must be angry. Now that he challenged Qin Hao, he couldn't bear the loneliness anymore. After all, the Spirit Beast sect was a first-rate power. Today, they were inconspicuous. They wanted to step on Qin Hao and attract attention. However, if they stepped on Dendi, Chang Hello would be responsible for the consequences. Everyone was shocked again. Qin Hao was already under a lot of pressure when facing Xian Yuanfeng. However, he still accepted Chang Helo's challenge. Wasn't he a bit too arrogant? Although Chang Helo was a disciple of a first-rate sect, his personal strength was not much weaker than Xian Yuanfeng's. How much face did this master of Dangu have to step on in the southern region? Ning Chaofan, who was in the corner far away, smiled disdainfully. Another person who didn't know his place had come. Chang Helo had already become a laughingstock yesterday. Today, he was arrogant again. If that's the case, count me in too. Suddenly, another person stood out. It was Tang Xingqian from the Herbal Medicine Hall. He stood under the stage and stood shoulder to shoulder with Chang Helo. They looked like brothers fighting a tiger. At this moment, all the experts present could not remain calm. They looked at each other. It seemed that Pavilion Master Dan Go was too arrogant. Today, he had provoked the dissatisfaction of many young people in the southern region. In fact, it was not just Chang Helo and Tang Xingqian. The Sword Sect, the Sage Hall, the Li family, the Inscription Source Pavilion, and other forces, including the Ning family, were all ready to make a move. They stared arrogantly at Qin Hao. If it were not for Elder Meng of the Sword Sect and Ning Hongshuan's suppression, people from the Sword Sect and the Ning family would have stood out. At this moment, many elders in the sect saw that the disciples were ready to fight. They looked at them with deterrence and suppressed the disciples' desire to fight. At present, there were already 3 people who wanted to fight Qin Hao. This was very unfavorable for him. Although the southern region was strong, the older generation did not have the bad habit of bullying the weak. Moreover, Qin Hao was the pavilion master of the Western Liang Pavilion, which was equivalent to the sect leaders present. His status was noble. It would be disrespectful if everyone challenged him. After this round of consecutive battles, Qin Hao would be exhausted to the point of collapsing. Come on! Qin Hao glanced at Tang Xingqian and Chang Helo. He did not refuse. In fact, he did not mind if a few more disciples from the sect came. Since Dendi had threatened to suppress the southern region, he should have the courage and boldness to do so. If he avoided the fight, others would laugh at him. Moreover, Qin Hao himself did not want to offend that person. However, Tang Xingqian and Chang Helo stood out. Did they really want to correct the name of the southern region warriors? Qin Hao did not think that they were so noble that they could say it directly if they did not like him. All right, little pavilion master Qin has spoken. Go. Senior Meng stepped back. Since Qin Hao had agreed, he naturally could not stop him. Moreover, Xianyuan Wuba looked at Senior Meng with an extremely dissatisfied gaze. Thank you, Senior. I will definitely make the southern region famous. The two of them cupped their hands and landed on the arena. They stood beside Xian Yuanfeng in a triangular formation and stared at Qin Hao covetously. Another one who doesn't know the difference between life and death. Tang Xingqian didn't learn his alchemy skills well. Old Tang Dou's ability to embarrass himself, but he did learn some skills. Ning Chaofan laughed and threw away the melon seeds in his hand. Xiaogua and Kei revealed strange expressions. The southern region had given their big brother a chance to show off in today's battle. It was too good. Even I can't help but want to fight. Brother Ruhan, Sister Wanqin, Little Nine, Xing Sword Prince, and Big Brother Qin are all here. That's great. Xiaogua's body was faintly filled with battle aura. He really wanted to have a big fight with the southern region. Ha ha! Xianyuan Wuji, who had been silent, spat out a teasing smile. Even he could not help it. These arrogant fellows from the southern region really thought that the Emperor Wu of the northern region was a pushover? To be able to stand out among hundreds of thousands of younger warriors, one could imagine how terrifying his strength was. However, this group of people actually thought that Qin Hao was a little sheep and wanted to step on him. "What are you laughing at?" Xianyuan Wuying heard and turned to look at Xianyuan Wuji. "Qin Hao will be killed by Feng Er. Wuji, you can take your revenge. Later, try to watch carefully. Feng Er will show the best side of the Xianyuan family's soul source. That is what you need to learn." "Yes, second uncle. Wuji will definitely follow Brother Feng's example." Xianyuan Wuji nodded. However, he felt very uncomfortable. In fact, Xianyuan Wuying and Xianyuan Wuba had treated their generation well. However, Xianyuan Feng's performance would probably disappoint his second uncle. Because Qin Hao was simply a monster, an existence that could not be defeated. At this moment, Xianyuan Feng on the stage was very dissatisfied. He coldly glanced at Changhe Lo and Tang Xingqian. They dared to come up and steal his thunder. However, he did not say anything. After all, the Herbal Medicine Hall and the Spiritual Beast sect were also members of the southern region. They were fighting for the southern region. "In fact, it's useless whether you two come up or not. Because I'm here, you won't have a chance to fight." Xianyuan Feng sneered at the two of them. "Brother Feng is right. Since that's the case, let me fight in the first round. Brother Feng, it'll be good for you to test this person's ability and force him to reveal his weakness. It'll be easier for you to win." Chong, he sneered. Was it really for Xianyuan Feng? No, as long as he fought, Xianyuan Feng would not have a chance. As for Qin Hao's flaw, did he need to force it out? In Changhe Lo's eyes, the Shiliang Pavilion Master was no good. "Brother, let me fight him. I always feel that he's a little strange." Tang Xingqian looked a little dignified. He was an alchemist and knew best how extraordinary alchemists were. Generally speaking, alchemists would often take medicinal baths for themselves or take some strengthening pills. In fact, alchemists' combat strength was not as weak as imagined. In particular, Qin Hao had defeated Xianyuan Wuji before. "No need to be so troublesome. All of you can come together. I'm in a hurry." Just as the three of them were arguing, Qin Hao said something that shocked everyone. "Jiutian Divine Emperor." Chapter 1286. Show some true skills together? 1 against 3? Everyone's face was filled with surprise. It was not unheard of to have fewer people fighting more people. It was only when one side was extremely strong, and their talent and cultivation level were higher than the other side's that there would be a situation where there were fewer people fighting against more people. However, this condition was clearly not suitable for Qin Hao. He was the one who was the weaker party. Qin Hao was in the 3rd level of the Venerable Realm, and Xianyuan Feng, who was in the 8th level of the Venerable Realm. Changhe Lo and Tang Xingqian were actually not weaker than Xianyuan Feng. In such a weak situation, Qin Hao dared to boast that he would fight 1 against 3. He simply did not put Xianyuan Feng and the other two in his eyes. Where does he get his confidence from? Is Pavilion Master Shiliang an idiot who only knows how to refine pills? It's still unknown whether he can defeat one of them. He's challenging 3 at the same time. How arrogant! Xianyuan Feng, Changhe Lo, and Tang Xingqian are already extremely strong. Moreover, they are terrifying essence soul martial artists. With 3 kinds of essence souls released at the same time, I'm afraid it's extremely difficult to find someone who can match them. If there is, only the Holy Sun Yu Qianyang and Shou Wuk can suppress them. The disciples of various sects and schools were discussing incessantly. They were not only ridiculing Qin Hao for his foolish arrogance. At the same time, they were also analyzing the battle situation. Their words were very reasonable. Under normal circumstances, the ability of an essence soul martial artist was far superior to that of an ordinary martial artist. For example, Xianyuan Feng, when his gravity essence soul was enhanced, he could greatly restrict opponents of the same level and achieve the effect of defeating opponents of a higher level. Changhe Lo and Tang Xingchen were the same. Standing in front of Qin Hao were not ordinary martial artists, but rather three formidable soul essence heaven's prides. When these three people released their soul essence together, among the disciples of the various sects present, there really were not many people who were willing to face them. Among them, Yu Qianyang did not dare to say that he would win easily. If he won, he would have to pay a big price. Arrogant bastard! Yu Qianyang clasped his hands behind his back and sneered. He did not refute the crowd's opinion. With his outstanding ability, he naturally could defeat Xianyuan Feng and the other two. But at that time, he would more or less suffer some injuries. If it were not for the deep hatred between them, he would not have been stupid enough to face the siege of three soul essence martial artists at the same time. The elders also looked somewhat displeased. Previously, when Qin Hao had said that he would suppress the southern mountain range, they had all taken it as a joke and laughed it off to give face to Pavilion Master Dan Go. However, at this moment, Qin Hao directly slapped the southern region in the face. He actually dared to fight against three strong cultivators as a weak cultivator. However, no one came out to stop him. Qin Hao was looking for trouble, so let him be. After all, Dan Go was the only one who would lose face. Shameless boasting. I alone, with one move, am enough to defeat you. Tang Xingchen stepped forward angrily. He still had the pride of being a genius of the southern mountain range, so he would not allow Qin Hao, a mere level 3 Yuan Venerate, to be so presumptuous. Tang Xingchen was also an alchemy master of the southern mountain range, yet he had defeated the arrogant disciple of Western Liang. Changhe Lo and Xianyuan Feng did not stop him. At the moment, the two of them felt that Qin Hao was not worthy of them joining forces. Thus, they chose to watch the battle quietly. 7th level Venerate, Soul Essence Martial Artist, take this move of mine. Let me see if your ability is worthy of your arrogant words. Tang Xingchen simply stated his cultivation level as the energy around his body blossomed and flickered with a purple light. He raised both his palms and Yuan fire rose from his palms. These two Yuan fires raged and spread towards the arena. In the blink of an eye, they burned into a sea of fire, as if they wanted to bury Qin Hao. With the release of his mind power, Tang Xingchen controlled the sea of fire and sent it crashing towards Qin Hao's head. It was as terrifying as rolling lava. Qin Hao stood calmly and ignored the sky fire descending on his head. At that moment, his body seemed to be filled with a powerful and strange force field. The sky fire that was crashing down from the sky was actually blocked by this strange force. No matter how hard Tang Xingchen tried, the lava crashing down from the sky was unable to fall, which made him feel extremely embarrassed. You are still not good enough. Your mind power is too weak. Even if I don't resist and stand here to let you attack me, your Yuan fire won't be able to do anything to me, Qin Hao said. At the moment, he was only relying on his mind power field to make it difficult for the 7th level Tang Xingchen to move. If his opponent did not use his mind power, Qin Hao would naturally not use it either. Tang Xingchen's expression was very ugly. Naturally, he could feel that Qin Hao's mind power was extremely strong. This strength was obviously above his. Otherwise, his sea of fire would not be blocked. To a pill master, the level of his mind power was extremely important. To a large extent, it determined a pill master's future and prospects. Previously, Tang Xingchen did not think much of Qin Hao. Even if he had refined the Saint Soul pill, as he said, he had improved on the ancient formula. Tang Xingchen thought that even if the formula was in his hands, he would still be able to refine an epic-making immortal pill. But now it was different. Qin Hao's mind power was ridiculously strong. In terms of starting as a pill master, he had already left Tang Xingchen in the dust. Based on the difference in their mind's power, it was destined that their future achievements would only be greater and greater. In this lifetime, they would probably not be able to surpass Qin Hao. Furnace 9 changes. Tang Xingchen roared. Under the control of his mind power, the sea of fire, which had been unable to fall, retreated to the sky like a tide. But immediately after, it compressed together and formed 9 furnaces that spat out flames. Of course, these 9 furnaces were not real. They were the condensation of fire spells. In terms of power, they could not be mentioned in the same breath as the sea of fire. Then, Tang Xingchen's arm slashed down. The 9 furnaces whistled and smashed towards Qin Hao's head one after another. Seeing this scene, the expressions of many experts changed slightly. Tang Xingchen of the Herbal Medicine Hall was indeed not weak. Just based on the attacking momentum of the 9 furnaces, this person could be ranked among the top geniuses in the southern region. At the same time, many people were also worried. Among them, Elder Meng was so anxious that he secretly sent a look to Dan Ji's monster trainer, asking him to be prepared for rescue. Although Li Beitong had set the rule that outsiders were not allowed to interfere in the battle. But when it came to that moment, no one would ignore the death of their own genius. Master Tang was like this. Elder Wan of the Spiritual Beast sect was like this. Perhaps Xianyuan Wubao was like this as well. Therefore, Dan Ji's side had no qualms about intervening. As for Elder Meng himself, it was inconvenient for him. After all, he was from the Sword sect, not Dan Ji's elder. He just could not bear to see an alchemy genius of a generation die in this arena. However, the monster trainer did not seem to have seen Elder Meng's hint. He watched the 9 furnaces crazily smash down, not moving at all. That made Mr. Meng very unhappy. Were all the people of the Dantian Pavilion so arrogant? Were they all so arrogant? At this moment, a series of explosions exploded in the arena. Elder Meng's heart trembled. He immediately turned his head to look. It would be a pity to let Qin Hao die here. As soon as he turned his head, Elder Meng was shocked. The 9 furnaces fell one after another. This time, Qin Hao's mind energy did not succeed in blocking them. They were penetrated one after another and hit on Qin Hao's body. Under this crazy attack, the arena shook violently. However, just as everyone felt pity for this and thought that Qin Hao had met with misfortune, the flames on the arena dissipated. The lingering sound of the rumbling dispersed, and a proud figure miraculously appeared in front of everyone's eyes. He was still standing there with a calm expression. His clothes were clean and spotless, showing a kind of arrogance. The disciples of the various sects were shocked. He was actually fine. Moreover, under the crazy attack of the 9 furnaces, Qin Hao's clothes did not even have a trace of stain. Tang Xingchen's 7th stage Venerable Realm sorcery skill. Qin Hao was only 3rd stage sorcery skill. How did he survive? And he was still spotless. What a terrifying defensive power! How could this be? Tang Xingchen's heart trembled as if it had been pierced by a sharp needle. His body trembled, and his face was no longer calm. Although he still did not use the power of his primordial spirit in the attack just now, it was already the most powerful attack among the sorcery skills he had cultivated. In the past, people in the same realm as him would not dare to take it head-on. Because Tang Xingchen knew very well that it was not the 9 furnaces that smashed through Qin Hao's spirit net just now. It was Qin Hao who took the initiative to withdraw his defense. He even gave up his defense and took the attack with his physical body. However, he was fine and his clothes were spotless. Tang Xingchen's attack was neutralized invisibly. His opponent did not defend, or even did not bother to defend. Could it be that in Qin Hao's eyes, he, Tang Xingchen, was so weak? He had to take the initiative to give up his defense and take the attack. I've said that your mind energy is too weak, and the power of the sorcery skills you condense is limited. If you don't want to leave in a sorry state, show me some real skills. Or, if the three of you join forces, you might have a chance to see my primordial spirit, Qin Hao said calmly. However, his voice was like a ruthless heavy stone that smashed the heartstrings of the disciples of the various sections. The mind energy of Tang Xingchen from the herbal pill hall was considered weak? In that case, there were probably not many people in the southern region who were stronger than Tang Xingchen. An ordinary 8th stage Venerable Realm cultivator would not dare to take the sorcery skills condensed by his mind energy head-on. 9 consecutive attacks landed on Qin Hao's body, but he was not stained at all. He even threatened to ask Tang Xingchen to show his real skills. How cruel was this? Where was the dignity of the southern region's geniuses? You're too arrogant. Primordial spirit, open for me. Tang Xingchen made a sound like he was crying, and his expression was very twisted. Immediately after, smoke rose from behind him. Within the smoke, an even larger furnace that was spitting out terrifying flames appeared. Around the furnace, a layer of starlight shone. It was obvious that his primordial spirit was not just a simple furnace, but a very high-end and terrifying mutated furnace. He was indeed showing his real skills. Moreover, it was a desperate move used by martial artists below the Emperor realm. At this moment, Tang Xingchen's primordial spirit appeared, and the furnace continued to expand. The flames that were spitting out were like fire dragons that were about to soar, enveloping the entire arena. Beneath the furnace, even Chang Heluo and Xianyuan Feng couldn't help but reveal uncomfortable expressions. Their bodies felt as if they were being refined, and beads of sweat rolled down their faces. The two of them didn't hesitate to release their soul power, and only then did they feel a little better. When facing a martial artist's primordial spirit, they had to use their soul power to fight back. The might of a primordial spirit was superior to that of ordinary origin energy. This was the real reason why ordinary martialists were unable to contend with a primordial spirit martialist. This time, I'm afraid the Western Liang Pavilion Master will not be so arrogant. He will pay the price for underestimating the southern region. Tang Xingchen's furnace source spirit is really terrifying. This power is already comparable to a peak Yuan venerates. The Western Liang Pavilion Master better not die on the arena. Ha ha! The disciples of the various sects laughed. This was the first time they had become extremely serious. It was not easy to see a primordial spirit martialist using a desperate move. After all, primordial spirit martialists were very rare in the divine wilderness continent. This time, they wanted to see how the Western Liang Pavilion Master would handle it. Or perhaps, Tang Xingchen would be able to force out Qin Hao's primordial spirit. Not only were the disciples looking forward to it, but the elders of the various sects were also looking forward to it. Education 123 Literature Network. Chapter 1287. Qian Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Changhe Lo rematch. The furnace continued to expand as Tang Xingchen's soul power continued to pour into it. The furnace was like a volcano spewing lava, majestic and unshakable as it tried to kill Qin Hao. The flames on the furnace surged and formed 9 flaming dragons that roared above the furnace, adding to its domineering aura. If this kid enters the sacred temple, his future achievements will far surpass his achievements in the herbal medicine hall. It's a pity that he went astray and buried his talent. Deputy Yang Tai sighed softly. He observed that Tang Xingchen's ability to control fire was extraordinary. If he did not become an alchemist and chose to enter the Scorching Sun Temple, Tang Xingchen would definitely have a seat in the inner cabinet. This evaluation was very high. The other elders nodded and agreed with the deputy. Tang Xingchen was indeed outstanding. If he cultivated in the sacred temple, his achievements would be even higher. Of course, his talent could only be classified as outstanding. The sacred temple did not lack outstanding disciples like Tang Xingchen. Compared to Yu Qianyang, the gap was still not small. Yu Qianyang was worthy of the title of a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. Yu Qianyang's lips curled up slightly when he heard this. He had witnessed the battle and felt that Tang Xingchen was indeed not bad. It was a pity that the sacred temple had him. Even if Tang Xingchen entered the sect, he would never be able to make a name for himself. As he spoke, Tang Xingchen had already infused the strongest amount of soul power into his origin soul furnace, causing its power to reach its peak. The disciples of the various sects who were closer to the furnace were forced back by the heat wave. He roared, and the huge furnace that was like a volcano rushed toward Qin Hao. 9 dragons circled above the furnace and breathed out scorching hot breaths. The scene was extremely shocking. Qin Hao's expression did not change as he faced the terrifying killing blow. He stomped on the ground and raised his right arm. His fair palm slowly clenched into a fist. A glaring halo enveloped his fist, forming a spiral-shaped airflow. From afar, the airflow looked like a madly accelerating drill, sharp and incisive. If this is your best, then the genius of the southern region is truly disappointing. Qin Hao smiled faintly. A level 7 Yuan venerate like Tang Xingchen wasn't worthy of using his source soul. At this moment, the spiraling vital energy around his fist had undergone a qualitative change through the dragon jade art of the indestructible reincarnation art. This kind of yuan qi that had undergone a qualitative change had damage that far exceeded that of ordinary martial artists by several times. It was extremely terrifying. When the furnace smashed down, 9 dragon breaths shot out at the same time. Qin Hao's smile vanished, and his expression became resolute as he punched out. Bang! It was deafening. This punch seemed to have struck everyone's hearts, causing their bodies and minds to tremble violently. Crazy! The Xiaoyang Pavilion Master was simply a lunatic. Faced with a level 7 Yuan venerate like Tang Xingchen, Qin Hao, who was only a level 3 Yuan venerate, had actually used the power of his physical body to withstand the killing blow of his opponent's source soul. Did he want to be smashed to pieces? However, the person who would be smashed to pieces wasn't Qin Hao. In the next instant, everyone was shocked to see that the giant furnace that was violently suppressing Qin Hao had stopped advancing above his head. Under the impact of a huge force, the dragon breath that gushed out from the 9 dragons revolving around the furnace was disintegrated before it could reach Qin Hao's body. The 9 fire dragons also disintegrated. They wailed in unison before disappearing on the spot. On the arena, the space seemed to have frozen. Everyone watched helplessly as Qin Hao stood upright and punched forward. His fist entered the furnace and the 9 dragons dissipated. Had he blocked it? Everyone was shocked. Of course, Tang Xingchen was also shocked. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Luo Yunyang had actually blocked his source soul attack with just his bare fist. Was he a monster? Bang! There was a second explosion. Qin Hao had merely blocked it? Obviously, it wasn't that simple. A fist aura burst out of the solidified furnace and completely penetrated Tang Xingchen's source soul. Then, the source soul furnace collapsed. It was a horrible sight to behold. The fist aura was like an arrow that tore through the air and flew towards Tang Xingchen in the blink of an eye. His source soul was injured. Tang Xingchen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was full of shock, but he didn't have time to be shocked. At that moment, he saw the terrifying fist aura that had penetrated the furnace flying towards him. He formed a seal with his hands and illusions of furnaces appeared around him one after another. Then, these illusions overlapped and turned into a furnace that stood in front of him to block the attack. However, even his source soul couldn't withstand Qin Hao's punch. How could the furnace barrier condensed by magic be able to block it? The outcome was obvious. As the fist aura flew past, it was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The furnace's barrier shattered into pieces, and then the fist aura entered Tang Xingchen's chest. With a cracking sound, a clear bone fracture was heard. Tang Xingchen's body flew backward and landed below the arena. "Be careful." Seeing this, Chang Helou flew up like a rock. He stretched out his palm and pressed on Tang Xingchen's shoulder. Then, he gathered his primordial qi and pulled him back to the arena. However, at that moment, Tang Xingchen's face was pale. Blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. His internal organs seemed to be in a mess, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. When he landed, his legs went soft and he almost knelt down. He lost with one punch. Boom. The scene was shocking. Everyone was dumbfounded. Although Tang Xingchen didn't fly out of the arena with the help of Chang Helou, no one was a fool. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. How can he be so strong? Is he really a third-level Yuan Venerate? He didn't even use his primordial spirit. He completely crushed the 7th-level Tang Xingchen with just one punch. Tang Xingchen didn't even have the ability to resist. Many sect disciples were shocked. A 3rd-level Yuan Venerate against a 7th-level Yuan Venerate was supposed to be a battle without any suspense. However, the final victor was actually the weaker 3rd-level Yuan Venerate Qin Hao. Moreover, what the southern region disciples couldn't accept was that Tang Xingchen had been completely crushed before he could even force Qin Hao to use his primordial spirit. Was the Xiaoyang Pavilion Master even human? Good physique. A shout of praise rang out in the Arhat Palace sect. Everyone looked over and saw Hall Master Yi Luo, a martial emperor powerhouse, looking at Qin Hao with admiration that couldn't be concealed at all. With such fist strength and such an indestructible body, he dared to take the attack of a martial artist who was far stronger than him. However, his opponent couldn't even withstand a single punch from Qin Hao. Qin Hao's fighting style was simply the signature of the Arhat Palace. If he hadn't known that Qin Hao was Dan Ji's pavilion master, Hall Master Yi Luo would have thought that the person who had defeated Tang Xingchen was a genius from his own sect. His admiration for Qin Hao came from the bottom of his heart. If even I can't block it, it would be strange if Tang Xingchen can, Luo Yuliang muttered, his voice full of resentment. Thinking back to the battle with Qin Hao, it was miserable. Luo Yuliang specialized in martial arts. He had received the most orthodox and excellent guidance from the Luo family since he was a child. In addition, his physique was naturally superior. Compared to the ordinary disciples of the Arhat Palace, Luo Yuliang was much stronger. However, even he couldn't withstand Qin Hao's power. Tang Xingchen, who had been refining elixirs all day and only cultivated his spiritual strength, was extremely weak. If he could withstand Qin Hao's attack, the sun would have risen from the west. Now, Tang Xingchen didn't die. Qin Hao had shown mercy. The Xiaoyang Pavilion Master deserves his reputation. At this time, in the direction of the Li family, Li Yaxu, the crown prince of Beio, also praised. However, there was some doubt between his eyebrows. He saw clearly that Qin Hao didn't defeat Tang Xingchen with only his physical strength. Among them, there was a layer of spiral-shaped primordial qi wrapped around his fist, which was very strange. At the moment of the punch, the primordial qi seemed to have undergone a qualitative change, and its power was greatly increased. It was very similar to the ancestral cultivation method of the Li family, the yellow formula of Dian. Could it be that Qin Hao had some relationship with the Li family? Had he been guided by a senior of the Li family and glimpsed the subtlety of the yellow formula of Dian? Humph, it's just a test. Maybe Master Tang's nephew wasn't ready and failed. Xianyuan Wuba said. His serious face gave people a sense of majesty and was unapproachable. It wasn't hard to tell that he didn't think Qin Hao was that great. After all, the protagonist of this battle was Xianyuan Feng. As for Tang Xingchen and Chang Helou, they were nothing more than foils. Although that was what he said, in his heart, Xianyuan Wubao was a little nervous. Qin Hao's physical strength was a little terrifying. It was a bit like the disciples of the Arhat Palace, which was not a good thing for Xianyuan Feng. However, the way he punched was similar to the qi-gathering state of the Li family. Was the Western Liang Pavilion Master from Western Liang? Xianyuan Wubao was a little confused. That's right, it's just a test. I was careless and underestimated my opponent. I wasn't prepared, but a loss is a loss. The people of the Herbal Medicine Hall are not sore losers. Next, my sworn brother, Chang Hello, will challenge Pavilion Master Qin. Tang Xingchen said in a disgruntled tone. However, everyone could see that he was trying his best to protect his dignity and face. In fact, in this battle, he and Qin Hao were not on the same level at all. You really know how to find excuses for yourself. Shameless Ba. Kair said angrily. In her heart, she was very concerned about Xiao Han. However, she also knew that if Qin Hao did not fight, it would be very difficult to get Xiao Han out of the Xianyuan family's hands. In a head-on battle, Dan Gu was completely at a disadvantage. Then, Tang Xingchen retreated to the side and Chang Hello stepped forward. I am an 8th level Yuan Venerate Beast Master and I understand the entertainment Tao. I would like to seek guidance from Pavilion Master Qin. Chang Hello cupped his fists. Who are you? Which sect are you from? Qin Hao asked calmly with a frown. It seemed as though he couldn't remember Chang Hello. Chang Hello's mouth twitched and his expression stiffened. He obviously knew that Qin Hao was deliberately making things difficult for him. However, he suppressed his anger and replied, I am Chang Hello, a disciple of the Spirit Beast sect. My master is… Oh, you can make your move now. Qin Hao interrupted him. He didn't have the time to understand Chang Hello's master. You! Chang Hello's anger rose and was written all over his face. This scene of being interrupted was very similar to what had happened to Elder Meng just now. Elder Meng was a half-step sword emperor and an elder of the sword sect, so it was normal for him to berate him. Qin Hao was being so rude to him. Did he really think he was a sect master? Why was he putting on airs? Alright, then I will use music to try out Pavilion Master Qin's ultimate technique. Chang Hello flipped his palm and the jade flute he always carried with him appeared. Hold on. Li Beitong controlled the auspicious cloud beneath his feet and slowly descended. He pointed at Chang Hello's flute and said, This is a worldly possession. It is unfair to others if you play the flute. But Senior Li, I am a beast tamer. Using music to control beasts is the only way for the Spirit Beast sect to compare notes with other martialists. If you don't let me use the flute, how can I play it? Chang Hello was sullen and embarrassed. Ha ha ha. Many of the disciples below burst into laughter. After thinking about it carefully, this was indeed the case. That won't do. Just summon your beast and compare notes with the master of Dangu. This flute is not an ordinary magic weapon. The rules just set are that both parties are not allowed to use any weapons or protective gear except for spirit. Playing the flute is against the rules, Li Beitong said stubbornly. Suddenly, Chang Hello's expression became extremely ugly. His jade flute was indeed a magic weapon. Moreover, its grade was not low. It was a top-grade venerable artifact. There was a very strong inscription on it. However, as a beast tamer, even if he summoned his beast to fight, without music to control it, the beast would not be able to exert its strength. Music was the only communication tool between a beast tamer and his beast. Music could allow them to become one, complementing each other's abilities. Without this flute, Chang Hello would never be able to defeat Qin Hao. At this point, everyone present could imagine the result. Haha, Master Li, the rules are set by people. They can be slightly modified. Weapons are not allowed, but beast tamers should be excluded. Otherwise, how can he fight? Elder Meng stood out to help. Well, you can forbid Chang Hello from summoning his beast to join the battle. Let him use this flute. Another point, if there are additional effects on the flute, you can't use them. You can only compare notes with little pavilion master Qin using pure music. Do you understand? Elder Meng's eyes were full of deterrence. Beast tamers were a very strong profession in the entire divine wilderness continent. On the surface, they were the same person. But behind them, there might be 1, 2, or even a group of 3 or 5 terrifying beasts. It was even rumored that a true imperial emperor could mobilize hundreds of thousands of demonic beasts to fight for him with a single thought. This was obviously very unfair to other warriors. Chang Helo was allowed to use the jade flute, but his beast could not fight again. Moreover, there was an inscription on the jade flute. Elder Meng could see through it at a glance, but he could not use it. He could only rely on Chang Helo's own ability. I can allow him to use tools. At this time, Qin Hao also spoke. As Chang Helo said, without a musical instrument, he could not display his ability. Well, if Pavilion Master Qin has no objection, then let the battle begin. But you can't summon your beast, and you can't play the inscription on the flute. Do you understand? Li Beitong warned. This junior will abide by the rules. Chang Helo nodded and secretly glanced at Qin Hao. In fact, he could also fight without the jade flute. As a soul essence beast tamer, Chang Helo's soul essence must be related to musical instruments. However, since Qin Hao agreed, was it because of the victory that caused his confidence to inflate, or was it because he looked down on Chang Helo? Since he was looking for trouble, Chang Helo would make good use of his own advantages. After the rules were reset, Li Beitong and Elder Meng walked away, leaving the field to Qin Hao and Chang Helo. This battle was between two different professions, alchemist against beast tamer. Beast tamers were more terrifying than warriors. This battle would not be like the previous one, where Qin Hao won easily. Everyone thought that this battle would be very exciting. Chapter 1288. Qianqian the Primordial Pill Venerate. Chapter 1288. Qianqian Sovereign descends. Chang Helo stepped forward. His robes were whiter than snow, and his silver hair fluttered in the wind. His extraordinary aura was on full display, attracting the admiration of many female disciples from the sect. Tang Xingchen's eyes were filled with admiration as he looked at him. His sworn brother's abilities were much greater than his own. Besides controlling war beasts, beast tamers also had outstanding musical skills. Chang Helo's musical talents were even more outstanding. It was rumored that the Music Palace, the most renowned music Dao Holy Land in the southern region, had no disciples who could surpass Chang Helo in terms of talent. The Music Palace was one of the top factions in the southern region, just like the Herb Hall and the Spirit Beast sect. The Music Palace specialized in music Dao, and no other sect in the southern region could compare to them when it came to music Dao. They represented absolute authority. The Music Palace disciples were unable to surpass Chang Helo in the field they were most proficient in. It was clear to see just how outstanding Chang Helo's musical talents were. Chang Helo didn't participate as a beast. In this battle, Chang Helo fought as a musician. Musicians are terrifying because they can infuse their mental strength into the music they're good at. Their attacks are all-pervasive. In less serious cases, the enemy will fall into the music and be unable to extricate themselves. In more serious cases, their minds will be obliterated by the musician. An old man with a gentle voice and unique charisma spoke from the crowd. At this moment, he was looking at Chang Helo with a gaze full of admiration. The old man was the prestigious Taishang elder of the Music Palace, a great musician at the pinnacle of the Emperor realm. 2 years ago, Chang Helo had paid a visit to the Music Palace and solved a difficult problem for the elders. Many Music Palace disciples had asked him for advice that day, but no one had been able to defeat Chang Helo in a few rounds of actual combat. Even the most outstanding disciple of the Music Palace was only able to fight Chang Helo to a draw, and they were evenly matched. The Grand Elder of the Music Palace naturally admired Changhe Lo's musical talent. Of course, he had secretly tried to rope in Changhe Lo and took the initiative to take him in as his personal disciple. However, he was rejected by Changhe Lo. Changhe Lo was very tempted by the fact that the Music Palace had the guidance of a professional senior. However, the Tao of Joy was not the only thing in his heart. The reason he chose to join the Spirit Beast sect was, of course, to learn more powerful methods of taming beasts and to dig out his own potential to the limit. With his talent in music, learning a high-level beast taming technique was like killing two birds with one stone. His future was much brighter than that of ordinary musicians. In this battle, Changhe Lo was not allowed to participate in the battle with his beast. He was going to fight as a musician. This caused the elders and disciples of the Music Palace to have strong expectations. After all, back in the Music Palace, no one could suppress Changhe Lo. Today, to what extent could the Pavilion Master of Western Liang fight Changhe Lo? Could he suppress Changhe Lo? Pavilion Master Qin's alchemy skills are unparalleled. In the future, you will be a peerless alchemy master. I will give you the sovereign's descent. I hope that Pavilion Master Qin can surpass Dendi as soon as possible and look down on all living beings in the alchemy world. Changhe Lo spoke slowly. His voice was still pleasant to the ears. However, as soon as he said this, the expressions of the Music Palace disciples changed. Sovereign's descent. Back when Changhe Lo had visited the Music Palace, he had made a name for himself with this song and won the admiration of many people. Even the eldest disciple of the Music Palace could not overshadow Changhe Lo's brilliance in front of this song. They did not expect him to use a unique skill as soon as he fought. In this battle, the Pavilion Master of Western Liang was in danger. Sovereign's descent? Qin Hao said lightly. These words triggered a melancholy in his heart. Then he nodded and said, I like it very much. After Denda's rebirth, he would definitely stir up a storm again. He would shake the 9 states and rule the world. And that day would not be too far away. Changhe Lo would have a chance to see it. You don't know what's good for you. Tang Xingchen snickered and said slowly to Qin Hao, You can't bear my sworn brother's song. Qin Hao narrowed his eyes and looked at Tang Xingchen. He said, You can't beat me with one punch. What right do you have to comment on me? You. Tang Xingchen was speechless. Pavilion Master Qin, be careful. Changhe Lo did not want to dwell on the victory just now. He held the jade flute to his lips. At this moment, his temperament changed drastically. He turned from an elegant prince to an emperor. It was difficult to resist his majesty. The melodious sound of the flute was heard. Changhe Lo's spiritual energy was integrated into the music. Sound waves could be seen with the naked eye. With him as the center, they radiated in all directions. Everyone in the audience listened quietly. In the beginning, the first verse of the song did not contain any stormy wave. The tone flowed slowly. It was very calm, with a slight hint of depression. It was like a young man who had just been born and was growing up facing the sun. The road of this young man was not very smooth. He faced ruthless suppression everywhere. After the calm verse, the song suddenly changed. The tone was very sonorous and powerful. It was like a young man who had achieved success in his studies and had begun to show his talent. He had trampled all the people who had once suppressed him under his feet. He was like an eagle spreading its wings and flying high. Like the others, Qin Hao listened quietly. Although Dendi did not understand music, Changhe Lo's talent was indeed outstanding. The mood of his performance could easily make people fall into it. In Qin Hao's mind, he seemed to have seen the young man who was suppressed. Wasn't that him? Good song. Qin Hao's eyes lit up and he praised. He and Changhe Lo had conflict. The other party's character was not good. But in terms of talent, it was admirable. Not only was his talent good, this song was also Qin Hao's intention. But suddenly, after Qin Hao's praise, the music changed again. It was no longer sonorous and powerful. It became extremely sharp and terrifying. It was as if the young man had become a mighty, mighty lord. He had the capital to conquer the world. There were countless strong people under his command. He wanted to lead them to stir up the world. Affected by the music, in everyone's mind, a magnificent scene slowly unfolded. The disciples of the various sects with lower cultivation could not bear Chang Helou's music. To be precise, they could not bear the young man in the mood. The young man who had become a mighty lord was too strong. His murderous aura was too strong. He seemed to be able to wipe out all living things with a casual move. The crowd below the stage was in an uproar. The warriors with lower cultivation covered their ears. Their faces were painful. Their minds were being destroyed by the music. Of course, the person who was most affected was Qin Hao on the stage. But at this moment, Qin Hao did not show any signs of pain. Wasn't the young man who had become a mighty lord in his mind, who wanted to conquer the world, exactly the same as his current situation? Qin Hao was already the master of Dangu, the crown prince of Xiliang Daqin, the son-in-law of Emperor Shao of the northern borderline. There were countless strong people behind him and many allies. The number of Qin soldiers was already huge. Not to mention the fact that he could decide the life and death of millions of people with just a thought, not to mention a move. As for Qin Hao, he just so happened to possess the qualifications to conquer the world. What a great mighty lord! I won't attack you before you finish your song. But since it's a competition, if you play alone, it'll be too boring. I'll fuse my sword intent and let everyone witness how he overlooks all living things, how his name shakes the 4 seas and 8 wastelands, and how he becomes the immortal emperor. Qin Hao's heart trembled violently. Then, the sound of a sword resonated around him. Chang Helou's character really wasn't much, but the Pill Emperor really liked this sovereign descends under the heavens. If he attacked now, he would undoubtedly break the mood of the song. He would not be able to hear the end and witness the young man become an emperor. Because as long as Qin Hao attacked, Chang Helou would definitely lose. After all, a musician master used his mental strength as a means of attack to disturb the minds of others. Qin Hao's mental strength was of the emperor grade. His soul was as strong as a 9-star great emperor. Even if Chang Helou played the flute for 10 years and died of exhaustion, he would not be able to hurt Qin Hao at all. Qin Hao really wanted to listen to the end of Sovereign Descends to the World, so he couldn't attack. Otherwise, Chang Helou would not be able to play it completely. "You are too arrogant!" Tang Xingqian, who was covering his ears, shouted with all his might. His eyes were red and he seemed to be struggling. Xianyuan Feng, who was beside him, was not much better. Obviously, their mental strength was beginning to be unable to withstand the powerful music. But Qin Hao meant that if he wanted to listen to it, Chang Helou would have the chance to play it completely. If Qin Hao did not want to listen to it, Chang Helou would not be able to play it. How arrogant was that? Hearing this, Chang Helou was instantly enraged. He changed his tune again, and the sharp sound turned into a rolling killing force that rushed towards Qin Hao's position. It was like the young man who was the commander of the powerful cultivators. Everything was ready and he was finally going to battle. At this moment, many disciples of the various sects below groaned and even screamed. The magnificent battlefield was born in their minds. In the picture, thousands of horses were galloping and attacking continuously. The figures of the powerful cultivators were killed one after another. Millions of corpses were lying on the ground and the sky was dyed red. The vast picture of the war was not something that the disciples with weak minds could withstand. Apart from the powerful figures of the 3 emperors and 4 sects, no one present could withstand such an epic scene. The disciples who heard the mighty Lord today would definitely be traumatized in their future cultivation. Good song, but this is just the beginning. The real path of the Emperor is crueler than you think," Qin Hao shouted. His memory seemed to have traveled back in time and returned to 600 years ago. 600 years ago, he, the sunset battle god of the Sunset Peak, and Empress Ling Xian, who was famous in the East Continent, started from scratch. The three of them had witnessed too much injustice. Therefore, they were determined to establish an empire that was different from other empires. For this goal, they pressed forward, disregarding life and death. They were also besieged and fell into desperate situations several times, wandering between life and death. But in the end, they succeeded and established the strongest country in the East Continent, the East Qin Empire. In the entire Divine Wilderness continent, the Daqin Empire of the East Continent was definitely the strongest. Qin Hao was the witness of the Emperor's path and also the ruler. He could understand the artistic conception in Changhe Lo's song the best. The Emperor's path in reality was crueler and bloodier than the one in the song. Buzz! The vast sound of the sword reverberated. Influenced by the song, Qin Hao gathered his qi into a sword and held a 3-foot-long sword in his hand. On the arena, he danced valiantly. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into the young man in the song. Every time he swung his sword, the image of a monarch would appear in the minds of the crowd. Watching Qin Hao's sword dance, the crowd felt as if they were watching a great emperor slaughtering countless experts in all directions, causing the sun and moon to dim, the universe to tremble, and the 8 desolations to submit. Every sword strike was deeply engraved in everyone's hearts. Chapter 1289. Primordial Alchemist Venerable. On the stage, the sword light and music intertwined and merged together. The sword represented the Emperor's wind. The music represented the Emperor's descent. Just as Qin Hao had said, he had truly achieved the harmony of the sword and music. However, the artistic conception of Changhe Lo's music was far less profound than the image of Qin Hao's sword dance. In terms of expression, Qin Hao's sword was more vivid and vivid. The youth in the music seemed to be alive in his body, allowing the audience to witness the birth of an emperor. It was not like Changhe Lo's performance, which relied on the artistic conception of the music to make people imagine the existence of the youth. Below the stage, the elders of the various sects revealed intoxicated expressions. Qin Hao's sword art was peerless, and the image of the emperor was vivid and pleasing to the eyes. It was impossible not to admire him. They did not expect that in addition to his pill arts, Dan Ji's sword art was also so outstanding. Such a vivid sword art is rare in 1,000 years. It will be a great regret of the southern region if he does not join our sword sect. Elder Meng was intoxicated and could not help but praise. The more he looked at Qin Hao, the more pleasing he felt to his eyes. With Qin Hao's talent in sword art, it would be great if he could join the sword sect. In the future, there would be another sword emperor in the southern region. Elder Meng had no doubts about this. Unfortunately, it seemed impossible for Pavilion Master Dan Gu to join the sword sect. Wuck, what do you think? In the sword sect's team, an elder with the strongest aura, who even Elder Meng had to treat with respect, looked at Shou Wuck, who stood tall and straight beside him. Elder Meng's eyes were like torches. However, this stronger elder of the sword sect was also impressed by Qin Hao's sword art. He asked the rising star of the sword sect, Shou Wuck. Pavilion Master Qin has a very unique aura. It seems to be innate and not acquired. Even I can't replicate this temperament. Of course, if one were to disregard his temperament, Pavilion Master Qin's swordsmanship was also very outstanding. Even in the entire southern region, very few people of the same generation could be his match. He responded to Changhe Lo's curved will with his sword will, making it difficult for his opponent's spiritual will to invade. Not only that, but Changhe Lo's curved will was also vaguely controlled by Pavilion Master Qin's sword will. He was completely worthy of the phrase, suppressing the southern region. Showuk paused and then shook his head with a smile. But if Marshal Granduncle's idea is to ask me who is better in terms of swordsmanship between me and Pavilion Master Qin, Wuk could only conceitedly reply. Although Pavilion Master Qin's sword Dao was very special amongst the countless sword cultivators of the continent, he could only be considered one of the best. He was still a step away from the rare level, and my sword art is named after Wuk. This is the best answer. The meaning was obvious. Based on the sword Dao that Qin Hao had displayed on the stage, he could be called a genius. Showuk also acknowledged this point. But among the countless sword cultivators of the divine wilderness continent, how many geniuses were there? Qin Hao was only one of them. At best, his swordsmanship could barely be considered as one of the best among the geniuses. As for Showuk, he was named after the Wuk sword sect. The strength of the sword sect's swordsmanship did not need to be proven to the world. In other words, there was still a gap between Qin Hao and Showuk. But this was only in terms of swordsmanship and not everything. If it was in terms of alchemy, Showuk was naturally inferior. The old man nodded. It was indeed so. Not to mention the southern region, in the entire divine wilderness continent, and even throughout history, how many people could compare to Showuk's talent in the sword Dao? This junior of the sect was born with the sword. He was destined to become the most dazzling sword emperor in the sword Dao, without exception. Even the current sect master of the Wuk sword sect would grin from ear to ear at the mention of his nephew's talent in the sword Dao. He seemed to be the southern region's current sword emperor. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Emperor. He had long seen Showuk's endless achievements in the future. However, in his previous speech, Showuk did not point out that Qin Hao's sword Dao was bad. This was because even he himself admitted that Qin Hao was outstanding. The evaluation he gave was very objective and was already very high. When the surrounding sword sect disciples heard this, they revealed envious expressions. It was very rare to be praised by a figure like their eldest senior brother. Unfortunately, since there was talent, there was also brilliance. No matter how outstanding Dan Ji's talent in the sword Dao was, when he met their eldest senior brother, he would lose all his brilliance. On the stage, the harmony of the sword melody continued. However, the moment Qin Hao performed the sword dance, Chang He completely lost his brilliance. At this moment, his melody was more like a foil, setting off Qin Hao's extraordinariness and greatness. As he played, Chang He's heart became more and more unsettled. The melody was already halfway through, but his opponent was not affected at all by the melody of the sovereign's descent. Not only that, but the mood of the melody seemed to be suppressed by the image of Qin Hao performing the sword dance. It was even mobilized. Between movement and silence, even a slight movement of Qin Hao's sword was as if Chang He was trying his best to cooperate with the melody, so as to make Qin Hao appear more perfect. He really did not expect that as a beast tamer, the melody he played one day would be tamed by someone else. This sovereign descends the world thoroughly became Qin Hao's portrayal. Kill! An angry roar sounded from the bottom of his heart. There were only 2 bars left before the melody ended. At this moment, the part Chang He was playing was the most important part of the sovereign's descent. At this moment, the sound waves that filled the sky converged into the shadows of terrifying beasts. The roars of the beasts rose and fell one after another. In the sky above the Ning family's huge auction house, dragons flew and phoenixes danced. Battle eagles flocked together in a magnificent display. On the ground, desolate beasts stood, tigers and wolves were everywhere. Next, these countless shadows of the beasts followed Chang He's melody and charged towards the lone sword-dancing Qin Hao. Looking at the shadows of the beasts that filled the sky, the disciples of the various sects who were already unable to resist fell to the ground in fright. One pile after another, they lost all the face of their sect. However, at this moment, no one blamed them. No one even cared about them. Everyone's eyes were focused on Qin Hao's sword dance. The elders of the various sects knew that from this moment onwards, the most terrifying part of the sovereign's descent would be either Qin Hao would be drowned by the beasts condensed by the melody, or he would be like the young emperor in the melody, sweeping through the world and suppressing the universe. Kill! Qin Hao chanted in his heart. It was as if he had truly transformed into the young emperor in the melody. The king's sword in his hand blossomed with a dazzling radiance. He faced the beasts bravely. Even though he was alone, even though he only had one sword, what was there to fear in this world? After all, he had also walked this path in the past. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of the sword reverberated between heaven and earth. The beasts that were close to him were caught in the sword light and could not withstand a single blow. The dragons fell, the phoenixes were extinguished, and the tigers and wolves fled. Influenced by the melody, Qin Hao seemed to have become one with the young emperor. He made the strong stronger and the emperor's heart bigger. Who in the world would dare to take a sword strike from him? The process of the battle was not long. After a section, the sovereign's descent fell into its final sound. The army of beasts was utterly defeated. In front of the emperor, they bowed down in submission. Qin Hao stood with his sword in his hand. His tall figure seemed to symbolize that the young man in the melody had finally completed the final battle, laid the foundation of the emperor's career, and achieved success. The melody slowly faded. The original ending of the melody should have been filled with a joyous atmosphere. However, at this moment it was filled with a sense of dejection. It was probably affected by Changhe Lo's state of mind. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The ending of the sovereign's descent changed its charm. After all, he had previously been in high spirits and threatened to give Qin Hao the sovereign's descent. However, everyone knew that he wanted to kill Qin Hao. However, the song ended. Not only did he not defeat Qin Hao, but he had also made the other party's glory. This was equivalent to Changhe Lo slapping his own face. It was obvious that he had lost. Even so, everyone still wanted to continue. In this battle, whether it was Qin Hao or Changhe Lo, their performances were very outstanding. In particular, Qin Hao's swordsmanship and the spirit of his sword dance made the elders of the southern region see a different side of the western Liang young pavilion master. Among them, Elder Meng of the sword sect admired Qin Hao from the bottom of his heart. He really hoped that Qin Hao would join the sword sect. If so, his future achievements in the sword Dao would definitely not be lower than his alchemy Dao. Wonderful, really wonderful! An expert opened his mouth and broke the silence of the scene. Yes, Changhe Lo is so young, but the artistic conception of music is so fascinating. I hope that the disciples of my music palace can take this battle as an example to learn from. The Supreme Elder of the Music Palace said. In addition to expressing his appreciation, there was also a hint of reprimand. Obviously, he was dissatisfied with the disciples of his sect. Speaking of fascinating, Pavilion Master Qin's sword dance was the sovereign's descent. The sword realm and the will of the song merged together. He was like the incarnation of a young emperor. His talent in the sword Dao really amazed Old Man. Our disciples of the sword sect must also take this battle as an example to learn from. Don't be lazy and miss out on learning. Elder Meng's sharp eyes swept across the disciples of the sword sect. We will remember. Many disciples of the sword sect responded. They lowered their heads, not daring to meet Elder Meng's eyes. In fact, they were suppressing their anger in their hearts. Did they need to learn from Qin Hao? If they wanted to learn, they should learn from their eldest senior brother, Shouwak. Only eldest senior brother had the qualifications to make everyone learn from him. If eldest senior brother had been the one to perform the sword dance, he would have done better than Qin Hao. No, Chang Hello of the Spirit Beast sect was not worthy of being eldest senior brother's opponent. Pavilion Master Qin, I am Shou Wuk of the Sword sect. Just now, your sword Dao was worthy of the words suppress the southern region. Suddenly, Shou Wuk stepped forward slightly and expressed his opinion. This scene instantly caused a lot of surprise. Not only the disciples of the Sword sect, but the entire sect of the southern region, including many experts of other sects, felt that this was too sudden. Just now, the faces of the disciples of the Sword sect were filled with unwillingness. Obviously, they were promoting Shou Wuk. They were not convinced of Qin Hao at all. However, to everyone's surprise, Shou Wuk himself actually took the initiative to speak up for Qin Hao. In the land of the southern region, there were not many people whom Shou Wuk acknowledged. There were even fewer people who could make him take the initiative to stand up and admit that the other party was outstanding. However, Qin Hao had done it. Today was probably the first time that Shou Wuk publicly praised someone since he started practicing the sword Dao. Moreover, as soon as he opened his mouth, he directly said that Qin Hao was worthy of the words suppress the southern region. This evaluation was quite high. Humph! Yu Qianyang glanced at Shou Wuk with an extremely dissatisfied gaze. People often regarded him and Shou Wuk as top prides of the southern region. However, he had never received the approval of Shou Wuk. However, Qin Hao, who was merely a third-level Yuan Venerate, had actually received the praise of Shou Wuk. This was really displeasing. Of course, although he was dissatisfied, he naturally did not dare step forward and directly refute Shou Wuk's point of view. Even though the two of them were regarded as the top prides of the younger generation in the southern region, their reputations were on par. However, deep down, Yu Qianyang knew that he was very likely not a match for Shou Wuk. If he dared to refute the other party, he would have to bear the consequences first. However, Yu Qianyang did not want to pay this price. End of chapter. Chapter 1290. The scene fell silent. The experts looked curiously at the two juniors standing in the air, Dan Ge, Qin Hao, and Shou Wuk from the Sword sect. These two young people were born in different worlds, and they were like rulers in their respective field. Now, Shou Wuk publicly praised Qin Hao. Was this a mutual appreciation between heroes? The elders secretly laughed. Among the peers in the southern region, almost no one could catch Shou Wuk's attention. He alone represented an era. It was lonely at the top. Only those who were equally talented could understand that kind of loneliness. Obviously, Qin Hao was such a person. Therefore, Shou Wuk, who was usually quiet, stood out and talked to Qin Hao. You flatter me. Swordsmanship is not my forte. I only know how to make pills. The dance just now was just improvisation. It is really embarrassing to show off in front of a genius from the Sword sect. Qin Hao smiled and looked at Shou Wuk. This person stood there quietly. He didn't release any aura, but his body emitted endless sword intent. The sword intent seemed to flow through every pore of his body. He didn't need to deliberately control it, but it merged with the great Tao of nature. This person's swordsmanship must be very terrifying and extreme. This kind of person, in his field of expertise, must be a demonic existence that far surpassed other geniuses. For example, Qin Hao had the ability to kill opponents one level higher than him. Shou Wuk was obviously the same kind of person as him. Of course, Qin Hao could not make a judgment without seeing him make a move. If the two of them were only talking about swordsmanship, Qin Hao was not confident that he could defeat his opponent. This was not a matter of the level of cultivation technique. In front of a true expert, talent was the most important, and swordsmanship was not Qin Hao's forte. In the 600 years of his previous life, he had worked hard on swordsmanship and created the crepe myrtle rainbow sword technique with Weiwei. But in essence, Qin Hao's talent in swordsmanship was not outstanding. His talent was in alchemy. Once he came into contact with alchemy, his thoughts would become abnormally active. In his previous life, Qin Hao himself had often been puzzled. Ever since he could remember, he had never come into contact with alchemy, nor had he ever been the disciple of an alchemy master. However, he was self-taught. Medicinal herbs, medicinal pills, as long as he could think of them, all of the records would automatically appear in his mind. The names of millions of medicinal pills, their formulas, medicinal herbs, how high the temperature of the flames should be when concocting pills, the strength of the flames during the tempering process, and all sorts of other details involuntarily appeared in his mind. There was no need to think at all. Qin Hao used to think that he was a weirdo. Later on, he thought that this was probably his talent. What was talent? It was destined by the heavens. He remembered that because of this, Zhan Wu had even joked about Qin Hao, saying that he was the reincarnation of some great god from the primordial era. As a result, the essence of his first life's pill Tao was left in his mind. At that time, Qin Hao laughed and said that if he was the reincarnation of a god, he would return to the realm of the gods in the future and explore the wonderful world of the gods with Zhan Wu and Ling Xian. Once upon a time, I had an outstanding genius in swordsmanship by my side. He was extremely obsessed with sword. If he were here today, he would definitely be very happy to get to know you. Qin Hao shook off his thoughts and responded to Shou Wuk. His tone was a little sad. Not only was he sad that things had changed, but he was also sad that Lin Feng had fallen in the Medicine Valley. In terms of talent, senior brother Lin Feng would probably not be a match for Shou Wuk. However, Lin Feng's dedication to the sword, especially the sword blade storm that he had unleashed at the end, had actually surpassed the highest level of understanding of the sword among swordsmen in this world. If Lin Feng were still alive, his level of swordsmanship would definitely reach a whole new level and open up a broader horizon. Unfortunately, as long as the heart of the sword doesn't die, the soul of the sword will always be there. The person who is qualified to be mentioned by Brother Qin must be an extremely outstanding existence. Wuk is deeply regretful that we have not met, Shou Wuk replied. From Qin Hao's tone, he could vaguely guess that that person might not be alive anymore. As long as the heart of the sword doesn't die, the soul of the sword will always be there, Qin Hao muttered in a low voice. His eyes flashed with excitement as he smiled. Perhaps the two of you will have the chance to meet. Shou Wuk was right. As long as the heart of the sword doesn't die, the soul of the sword will always be there. Lin Feng's obsession with swords was too deep. After his death, his soul could resist the heavenly Tao and not be destroyed by it. Qin Hao had a chance to use the power of the serene water to protect Lin Feng's remnant soul. As long as he obtained the universal soil controlled by the Xianyuan family, Lin Feng could be resurrected. This was his main purpose in coming to the southern region. As for participating in the South Pole Divine Palace and looking for Jing Qinqi, they were only secondary. You two little guys are chatting so happily as soon as you meet. Wuk, you can invite young Pavilion Master Qin to the Sword Sect as a guest some other day. Don't waste his time now. Elder Meng stood out and said with a smile. He glanced at Chang Lo on the stage. At this moment, Qin Hao and Shou Wuk were talking to each other. Chang Lo was completely ignored. He didn't know whether to leave or stay. He stood there alone and was extremely embarrassed. Shou Wuk nodded and said seriously, Brother Qin, I will wait for your arrival in the Sword Sect. I hope that you can give me some pointers and help me open up a new great way of the Sword Realm. Sparring with peers was the best way to improve oneself quickly. I don't dare to give you pointers, but I will definitely pay you a visit. Qin Hao cupped his fists and said. Shou Wuk was a good person. Then, Qin Hao looked at Chang Lo and said calmly, Take the initiative to go down. Sovereign's Descent. Qin Hao liked this song very much. For the sake of the song, Chang Lo took the initiative to leave. Qin Hao wouldn't embarrass him. He could clearly recognize the gap between him and Qin Hao. No matter what, it was impossible for him to win. In fact, Chang Hello had already experienced Qin Hao's strength. Although he didn't use his soul of origin in the song just now, it was obvious that he had reached his limit. However, he was completely suppressed by Qin Hao's sword intent, which even drove his song. Chang Hello controlled the song, while Qin Hao could control Chang Hello. The level of their artistic conception was not on the same level at all. But was he going to let him leave like this? Especially when Qin Hao said, "Take the initiative to go down." This was undoubtedly a humiliation to Chang Hello. "How dare you?" Tang Xingchen shouted angrily. "My sworn brother didn't defeat you, but you didn't do anything to him either. He wasn't injured at all. Why should you let him go down?" The disciples of the various sects heard this and nodded. This was reasonable. Chang Hello's sovereign's descent didn't affect Qin Hao. But Qin Hao also couldn't do anything to Chang Hello. At best, the two of them were evenly matched. Why was Qin Hao so high and mighty as to point at someone else's nose and let Chang Hello go? "Who's higher and who's lower, don't you know in your heart?" Xiaogua raised his head and shouted. Melon Brother naturally understood that Qin Hao was the absolute master just now. If Big Brother made a move, Chang Hello would have fallen down. The reason why he didn't hurt him was probably because Big Brother liked to listen to this song and couldn't bear to interrupt it. Otherwise, Chang Hello was unscathed? It would be strange. Chang Hello, as a genius of the Spirit Beast sect, you should recognize the facts. You are well aware of the strong and the weak. Even if you use the soul essence, you will still be defeated. Don't waste other people's good intentions and embarrass yourself. Showuk whispered. Even he could see it. As the person involved, how could Chang Hello not feel it? Then he was not worthy of being called a genius, but a mediocre person. Chang Hello's face was very embarrassed. If Qin Hao asked him to go down, he could completely ignore it. But Showuk's words were very important. "Wuk, you're too biased, aren't you?" At this moment, Yu Qianyang of the Scorching Sun Temple looked at Chief Wuk with his eyes that were as arrogant as an eagle's. He smiled coldly and said, "Both of you are geniuses, and you are one of the top geniuses of the Southern Territory. You should know that anything can happen if a warrior doesn't use his full strength. How can you conclude that Chang Helua's battle strength is not as good as Qin Wentian's? What's more, Chang Helua's musical realm is not worse than Qin Hao's sword realm." At this moment, the scene became lively. The elders of the various sects looked at the two geniuses who were arguing. Chang Hello was restricted because of his concept. Qin Hao asked him to leave, but he refused to leave, and Showuk spoke for Qin Hao. Then, Yu Qianyang felt that Showuk's words were extreme, and that concept could not determine a martial artist's combat strength, so he spoke for Chang Hello. Who would have thought that this sword melody would cause the two most dazzling geniuses of the Southern Territory to disagree and compete openly in front of everyone? This was very interesting. You think that concept can't determine a martial artist's combat strength? Do you want to try it with me? Showuk took a step towards Yu Qianyang. At this moment, a wind blew around him, and it was bone-chilling. In fact, Yu Qianyang was not wrong. Concept could not determine a martial artist's combat strength. However, it also depended on the person. Obviously, someone like Qin Hao was not someone that Chang Hello could compare to. And with this step, he was directly provoking Yu Qianyang. Obviously, he was not happy with Yu Qianyang. Yu Qianyang's eyes suddenly narrowed. As Showuk took a step forward, it was as if a sword was about to slash at his head. Yu Qianyang's heartstrings couldn't help but tighten. But then, anger surged from the bottom of his heart. How dare he provoke him in front of so many people? All right, let's use the Ning family as a stage to exchange pointers today. After all, you and I don't usually have this kind of opportunity. Although he was a little angry and trembling, Yu Qianyang naturally wouldn't lower his head to show Wuk on the surface. Everyone was watching, especially in front of his junior brothers from the sacred temple. He couldn't show any weakness to show Wuk of the sword sect. Nephew Wuk, nephew Qianyang, today is mainly a dispute between the Xianyuan family and Dan Go. If the two of you want to fight, can you choose a more suitable place? Xianyuan Wuba's voice was full of majesty, and his emperor's qi immediately made Shou Wuk and Yu Qianyang tremble. Junior has been impolite. Junior has been impolite. The two of them cupped their hands at the same time. Then, they glared at each other. Shou Wuk's eyes were like swords, and Yu Qianyang's eyes were like fire. They both retreated to their respective sect teams. Hee, the Crown Prince of Southern Ao is really awe-inspiring. With one sentence, the pride of the Sword Sect and the Sacred Temple's son didn't dare to meet him. I'm afraid only you, Xianyuan Wuba, have such tyrannical bearing. The Sword Sect's martial granduncle said unhappily. He didn't bother to listen to Xianyuan Wuba's reply and looked at Li Beitong. So, who won and who lost this round? This. Li Beitong couldn't answer. Qin Hao and Chang Hello were both unharmed, so it was hard to say. Then let's continue. At this time, Li Yaxu stood up and looked at Qin Hao and Chang Hello. Pavilion Master Qin is really an all-rounder. Not only is his alchemy skills extraordinary, but he is also outstanding in body refinement, vitality cultivation, and even in swordsmanship. However, Chang Hello hasn't used his soul of origin and hasn't used his full strength. Why don't the two of you continue to fight? This time, show your true abilities and let everyone see who is really stronger. What do you think, Pavilion Master Qin? Chang Hello looked at Qin Hao. He really didn't want to leave in a dull state. Just now, Yu Qianyang's words that the state of mind can't determine the winner reminded him and untied the knot in his heart, giving him hope to defeat Qin Hao. I gave you a chance, but you didn't know how to cherish it, Qin Hao said. He had intended to let Chang Helua leave safely. However, Chang Helua's ambitions were not small. He had repeatedly tried to step on Qin Hao's head in order to shine brightly in the southern domain. Fine, use your soul of origin? Qin Hao could give face to the Crown Prince of Li family and let the people of Blazing Sun Temple see what it meant to play with fire, especially Yu Qianyang. Let him see clearly what the state of fire was. Chapter 1291. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Fire Soul, Guqin's soul. Both sides had no objections and the battle continued. The atmosphere became more tense. In the battle just now, the two of them had harmonized their sword and intent. Even though they were competing on the stage, it was still pleasing to the eyes. The next battle would be a battle between their source souls. Source souls were the most lethal trump card for martialists below the Dharch realm. The disciples of the various sects were looking forward to this battle. All the powerhouses were also looking forward to seeing Qin Hao defeat Tang Xingchen with just his physical strength without using his source soul. Just now, he had used his sword path to respond to Chang Helo's music path. Under the monarch sword, the monarch descends was completely suppressed and Chang Helo's brilliance was completely lost. So far, Qin Hao had only shown everyone his strength and talent. Furthermore, he had shown brilliantly as a third-level Yuan Venerate despite being at a disadvantage. It was really hard to imagine how strong Qin Hao would be after he took out his source soul. Pavilion Master Qin's sword intent is so high that you can freely mobilize my Monarch Descends style. I Chang Hello am deeply impressed. In that case, I will give you the next song, Battle the Heavens. I hope Pavilion Master Qin will continue to give me guidance. Chang Helo's eyes were filled with resentment as his soul power surged. With a sweep of his Buddha hand, a brilliance blossomed from his palm. The brilliance condensed into a Guqin in front of him, exuding an austere aura. The Guqin was his source soul. As for his source spirit, it really was a musical instrument. This meant that even if he didn't use the flute, he could still compete with Qin Hao. However, after the rules were changed and musicians were allowed to use musical instruments, he would undoubtedly have a great advantage in the next battle. He could use a magic weapon, but Qin Hao couldn't use a weapon. Unfortunately, his magic weapon was a jade flute and not a guqin. The jade flute couldn't fuse with the guqin soul. Otherwise, his combat strength would surely rise by a great deal, and he might be able to crush Qin Hao and shock the world with a single brilliant feat. Previously, Chang He had taken a fancy to an extraordinary guqin during the auction. However, she was defeated by Qin Hao and given to the refined scholar. Every time he thought of this, the resentment in Chang He's eyes intensified, revealing a ruthless color. Releasing his guqin spirit, Chang He sat on the ground of the arena. His slender fingers stretched out, and his entire demeanor changed drastically. He was very elegant and noble. Different martial artists had different source spirits, so the aura they were given was also different. Like Shou Wuk, like a sword. Like Yu Qianyang, like fire. As for Chang he fully embodied the elegance and nobility of the guqin. This was even more attractive than when he played the flute. Spirit Beast Sex Chang He is so handsome. In our southern region, there has always been no lack of outstanding handsome men. However, there are very few who can compare to Chang He in terms of temperament and appearance. The female disciples of the Spirit Beast sect are so lucky. Even I want to join their sect. Even if I only look at Chang He from afar every day, I feel that my cultivation will improve a lot. You love-struck fool, haha. Below the arena, many female disciples of various sects were attracted by Chang He's aura. They admired him and praised him endlessly. Chang He listened quietly, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He had long been accustomed to it. If the girls did not praise him, it would be very abnormal. My sworn brother is really a dragon among men. No matter what environment he is in, as long as he releases his guqin spirit, he will immediately become the center of attention. Even I am envious, Tang Xingchen said. Even though he was considered a genius in alchemy, compared to Chang He, his aura was still lacking. Which man in the world did not want to be the dream lover of a woman and be fantasized by her? Then, he looked at Qin Hao. The master of Danji's appearance was not bad. However, this person was filled with an arrogant aura that made it difficult for others to approach him. A person like him would not be appreciated by beautiful women. You can't afford to enjoy this song, Battle the Heavens. Tang Xingchen looked at Qin Hao and teased. No one would be unconvinced by his sworn brother's guqin spirit. You are so annoying. You said before that my brother-in-law can't afford to be the ruler of the world, but what is the truth? Kei glared at Tang Xingchen in disgust. She really wanted to slap him. If you have nothing else to do, please shut up obediently. Don't be an eyesore like a flea. Who do you think you are? Do you think you are qualified to scold me? Tang Xingchen glared at him, very displeased. Who do you think you are? You can't even take a punch from my big brother, and you still have the face to stand on the arena. Hurry up and get off. Xiaogua retorted loudly. Competing in scolding? Melon Lord was never afraid of anyone. When Tang Xingchen heard this, his nose twitched. He was very angry. He was a first-rate genius in the southern mountain range, but someone called him a piece of trash. If he was not afraid of Xiaogua's identity, he would definitely say, "If you are not convinced, why don't we spar too?" Boom! A flame burned in the arena, breaking the noble aura that Chang He exuded. It also attracted the attention of the mesmerized crowd. Across from Chang He, Qin Hao's body emitted a fiery red aura that soared into the sky. Within the flames, Qin Hao's long hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. His deep eyes seemed to be infected by the fiery aura and turned into a faint golden color. At this time, the flame around him was whistling, but his temperament was as cold as a mountain. He stood in place, like a god of fire, high and mighty, giving people a sense of majesty that they could only look up to. Flame! Someone blurted out. His primordial spirit is one of the elements, the flame with the strongest explosive power. And the grade of this strange flame gives people a feeling that it is not ordinary. Everyone was surprised and subconsciously looked at the camp of the fierce Sun Temple. The group of people who were the best at playing with fire in the southern mountain range were there. It could be said that the disciples of the fierce Sun Temple, whether it was the primordial fire of an ordinary martial artist or the soul fire of an essence soul martial artist, every one of them was an expert in controlling fire. Qin Hao had already shown his alchemy, body refining, primordial qi, and sword skills. At this time, he released the flame primordial spirit. Did he want to use the power of flame to challenge Changhe Lo's Guqin spirit? Today, old man's eyes have been opened. Yes, I also feel that this trip was worthwhile. Little Pavilion Master Qin has given people too many surprises. His primordial spirit is actually a flame. Old Meng looked at many of his peers. Although the flame primordial spirit was very widespread in the primordial spirit system of martial artists, its lethality was definitely among the best. Yes, it's worth watching. Everyone nodded, looking forward to it more and more. At this moment, feeling the flame aura in the field, Yu Qianyang's face was a little ugly. As the holy son of the fierce Sun Temple, Yu Qianyang's talent was unquestionable. He was born with a strong affinity and perception of fire. The grade of his own flame was also quite high. However, the flame aura emitted by Qin Hao vaguely gave him a great sense of threat. This proved that the soul fire that Qin Hao controlled was not inferior to his soul fire. In this southern mountain range, in the field that he was good at, there was someone who could challenge the grade of his flame. It threatened Yu Qianyang's sense of superiority, and he did not like it. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1292. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. To crush one's opponent, it looks scary. I wonder how powerful it is. Yu Qianyang crossed his arms and said arrogantly. You will never forget it. Qin Hao glanced at Yu Qianyang. Did this kid feel threatened? That proved that Yu Qianyang's talent was not bad. If he did not feel threatened by the Red Lotus, the title of saint was just an illusion. Haha, let's wait and see. Yu Qianyang said coldly. He would never forget playing with fire in front of him? Qin Hao was too arrogant. Pavilion Master Qin, be careful. When the Red Lotus appeared, Changhe Lo's nobility was washed away. He was even angrier. He pressed his hands on the zither strings and plucked his fingers. Battle of the Heavens was played powerfully. The sound of the zither was heard in the field. The style of the song was completely different from Sovereign's Descent. Sovereign's Descent was like the growth of a young man. The prelude was gentle, but the end was majestic. As soon as Battle of the Heavens was played, the song went into a frenzy. It made people's blood boil. It was as if everyone's blood was stirred by the sound of the zither and rushed to their heads. The strong desire to fight could not be stopped. Zither, 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 the sound of the zither rushed toward Qin Hao. In the void, the sound waves seemed to turn into countless cold weapons. There were halberds, swords, evil knives, axes, hooks, and tridents. Thousands of weapons came out. It was like a feast of weapons. They wanted to bury Qin Hao and cut him into pieces. Many people could not help but cheer. Changhe Lo's music was indeed at the level of a genius. Few people in the southern region could be compared to him. Looking at the sky full of weapons and chopping down on Qin Hao's head, the outstanding disciples of the various sect turned pale. Especially the disciples of the music palace who were best at music. At this moment they really saw how terrifying Changhe Lo was. Obviously, the power of this song surpassed that of Sovereign's Descent. If Chang He fought their senior brother with Battle of the Heavens in the Music Palace, the result would be unpredictable. However, it would not be as simple as a draw. Among them, the chances of the eldest disciple of the Music Palace losing were extremely high. How could the master of Dangu win against him? Everyone believed that this time, it would be difficult for Qin Hao to be on par with Chang He. Rise. Qin Hao was not moved at all. He raised his arm and extended his index finger. A cluster of blood-like flames burned at the tip of his finger. With a thought, an incomparably strong mental energy merged into the soul fire. The soul fire seemed to have suddenly met butter, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge fire that covered the sky, enveloping half of the arena within it. As the sky full of weapons attacked, the sea of fire in front of Qin Hao surged. Tenacious tongues of fire separated and turned into the shapes of halberds, long swords, and evil sabers. They were actually weapons made of fire, axes, battle axes, hooks, and tridents. Tens of thousands of weapons were also launched, dazzling everyone. Then, these flaming weapons flew towards the sound wave weapons on the opposite side and collided with each other. Halberds against halberds, long swords against long swords, evil sabers and evil sabers exploded into balls of light. Each ball of light dissipated with a strong sound of breaking sound. Chang He used sound to gather weapons. Every weapon he condensed was completely blocked by Qin Hao's flaming weapons. None of them were missed. Good! Elder Meng could not help but burst into cheers. Even if he was not good at controlling fire, his silent heart was moved by Qin Hao's ability to control fire. Apart from the scorching sun temple, in the southern region, it had been many years since anyone had seen Qin Hao's exquisite fire control technique. This boy's talent in controlling fire is extremely profound. He is not comparable to Tang Xingqian. It's really a pity that he was not accepted into our sect. In the temple, an elder, like Elder Meng, could not help but praise Qin Hao's swordsmanship. He is very good, but compared to Qianyang, there is still a gap. Yang Tai said. Qin Hao's first display of his skills had shocked everyone. Since the master of Dangu was an alchemist, his ability to control fire was naturally extraordinary. However, in terms of the lethality of his flames, how could he, a mere alchemist, be compared to a combat-type sect like the Temple? Deputy Temple Master is right. Senior Brother Saint's talent in controlling fire is unparalleled. Pavilion Master Shi Liang's flames are absolutely vulnerable in front of the saint. A disciple also stood up and spoke for Yu Qianyang. Although that was the case, Qin Hao's display of skills had left many people in the temple in the dust. Yu Qianyang did not say anything. If Qin Hao only knew this move, then it was indeed not worth mentioning in front of him. Ha! On the stage, when Chang He saw that Qin Hao was actually able to completely neutralize his 10,000 weapons, he couldn't help but increase the intensity of his zither music. The fanaticism of the battle song abruptly increased, and when the sound wave blades were blocked, a second wave of attacks followed. The second round was a stampede of 10,000 beasts. It was like the most exciting second half of the monarch descending song. In the void, giant dragons and phoenixes appeared. On the ground, war elephants and tigers formed a group and turned into a beast tide. Under the guidance of the battle song, they rolled up a force that could topple mountains and overturn seas. They wanted to annihilate the sea of fire on the stage and the figure of the god of fire in the sea of fire. Unfortunately, in the monarch descending song, Chang He was suppressed by Qin Hao's swordsmanship. Although the battle song was more powerful than the monarch descending song, the same method was obviously useless against Qin Hao. His spiritual energy merged with the sea of flames, and the balls of flames turned into huge beast shadows. They looked like lava giants that walked out from the sea of flames. The beast shadows were dripping with liquid flames, and their roars shook the heavens as they charged towards the beast tide. At the moment, The fire dragon circled in the void and fought with the sound wave dragon. The fire phoenix let out a shrill cry as the more orthodox power of the phoenix crushed the sound wave dragon. The flaming war elephant on the ground stomped its huge feet and killed the opponent's war elephant. Just now, Chang Helua's 10,000 soldiers were blocked in the same way. Now, history was repeating itself. He could use sound waves to manifest 10,000 beasts, but Qin Hao could do the same. In fact, the power of the sound waves was even stronger than when Qin Hao used his Qin spirit to summon 10,000 beasts. Chang Helo was once again suppressed. Big Brother's ability to control fire is really getting better and better, Xiaogwa said as he watched the battlefield. He had also benefited greatly from the Beijiang Imperial Martial Competition, especially after fighting with Jiang Zizai. His potential had been greatly stimulated, and he was now a 5th-level Yuan Venerate. Although Qin Hao's cultivation base was progressing slowly, his use of innate talents had reached a superb level. This kind of innate ability was particular about merging with the Great Path. Once one's cultivation base increased, the might of their cultivation techniques would become extremely terrifying. Therefore, although Qin Hao seemed to be slow, he was actually constantly tempering himself, constantly seeking perfection, and constantly improving himself. Once his cultivation level increased one day, at that time, his battle prowess would become like a gushing ocean, unstoppable. 600 years have passed. Even time can't erase your innate talent. The Imperial Censor watched quietly. Under the Qilin mask, a pair of resolute eyes were filled with admiration and nostalgia. When he looked at the current Qin Hao, it was as if he was looking at the alchemy emperor of the East Continent who had once dominated the world. Divine Emperor Jiutian. Chapter 1293. How can this be? Tang Xingqian repeated old Tang Du's words in disbelief as he watched the battle. He had said that Qin Hao couldn't handle the sovereign's descent. Reality had proven that the sovereign's descent was completely suppressed by Qin Hao's swordsmanship. In the second battle, he had also said that Qin Hao couldn't handle it. He believed that the Xianyang Pavilion Master would suffer a crushing defeat. After all, his adopted brother's Guqin soul had appeared and played the battle against the heavens. The level of the sovereign's descent was even higher. But to everyone's surprise, not only was Chang Helua defeated, he was even beaten up by Qin Hao. This scene also surprised the disciples of the various sections. They had previously guessed that it would be very difficult for Qin Hao to be evenly matched with Chang Helua. That's right, the two of them weren't evenly matched this time. Instead, they were being crushed. Chang Helua was being crushed by Qin Hao. How can a mere 3rd-level Yuan Venerate be so strong? Xian Yuan Feng, who was standing at the back, couldn't remain calm. This kid, who was a top-notch prodigy of the Nanao Xian Yuan royal family, was actually trembling at the moment and looking anxious and flustered. He had only been surprised that Qin Hao had defeated Tang Xingqian with a single punch. However, Chang Helua had been suppressed in both battles. In the second battle, Chang Helua's performance could already be considered outstanding. The combination of his Guqin soul and the battle song had been terrifying. However, Qin Hao was even stronger than Chang Helua. His control of the fire soul was exquisite to the extreme. Xian Yuan Feng no longer had the same arrogance as he had when facing Xian Yuan Wuji. He was starting to feel a little timid. He didn't want to face Qin Hao again. He regretted it. Based on Chang Helua's current performance, his opponent's strength wasn't inferior to his. Even so, he was still being beaten back by Qin Hao. On the field, the beast tide was defeated and the fire grew stronger and stronger. The surging sea of fire had already swallowed half of the arena and was steadily pressing in the direction of Chang Helua. The space in which Chang Helua could unleash his power was shrinking. Zither, zither, zither. He raised the pitch of his zither again. Obviously, He felt a great threat from Qin Hao. If he couldn't turn the situation around quickly, he might lose. Chang Hello suddenly stood up from the ground. His murderous intent surged. The Guqin spirit beneath him floated up. He pressed his palms on the strings of the Guqin and plucked it at an even faster speed. A terrifying melody gathered into a huge storm and howled on the stage. Apart from that, sound waves swept through the void, and a translucent sun was born. It hung high in the sky like a scorching sun, emitting endless radiance. Beside the blazing sun, a crescent moon was born at the same time. The music formed an endless galaxy, surrounding the sun and the crescent moon in the middle. Rustle, the sound of the Guqin filled the air as if it had changed the climate of the southern region. The arena was cold and snowflakes formed by the music notes fell. Then, surging rivers, towering mountains, lush ancient forests, and an all-encompassing greater thousand worlds appeared in front of everyone's eyes amidst the battle music. It was a sight to behold. Chang Helo's music had evolved into an all-encompassing universe. Amazing! With such talent, the music palace will probably cease to exist in a few decades. Even if it exists with Chang Helo blocking it, it'll probably never be able to rise. Many of the elders were really shocked this time. With such talent, it was obvious that everyone had underestimated Chang Helo's ability. This person had probably surpassed the category of the top geniuses in the southern region and was beginning to strive for the position of Shou Wuk and Yu Qianyang. On the side, the supreme elder of the music palace had an extremely ugly expression. The music had transformed into an all-encompassing universe. In the music palace, there was really no disciple who could compare to Chang Helo. This was tantamount to slapping the music palace in the face. As the supreme music palace of the southern region, none of their disciples were a match for Chang Helo of the spiritual beast sect. In 100 years, when the descendants of the southern region mentioned the leader of the music palace, the first person they would think of would be Chang Helo, not the music palace. What a disgrace! What is the battle of the heavens? This is the profound meaning of the battle music. Let's see how you deal with it. Go! Chang Helo's expression was tense. His 5 fingers pulled the strings, and his strong fingers loosened. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Several fierce sound waves swept up the universe around him. Storms, snow, the sun, the moon, the endless galaxy, mountains, and rivers all rushed toward the sea of fire on the opposite shore. This majestic momentum seemed to communicate with the power of the heavenly path. It was incomparably terrifying. You are indeed a talent, but unfortunately you met me. You caused the heavens to attack, so I will return the favor with a grand scene of burning the world. After Qin Hao finished speaking, the sea of fire in front of him burned fiercely. The flames quickly rose to a height of hundreds of feet, wanting to drown the universe. Then, endless mental energy turned into thousands of strands and merged into the sea of fire. Each strand represented a will of all creation. Everyone was shocked to see a storm of fire fly out of the sea of fire. Soon after, an even more vivid and terrifying grand sun was born. Around the grand sun, there were galaxies, giant flaming mountains, and rivers of lava. Luo Ning played the zither, and the myriad of phenomena in the heavens could be seen. Qin Hao could also use the flames to evolve. What was more rare was that even the will of ice and snow was created. In the space behind the storm of fire, countless flaming snowflakes fell and rustled. Although Qin Hao was using fire to gather snow, the snow did not have the slightest bit of temperature, let alone scorching hot. Everyone could feel that the space of the flaming snowflakes was extremely cold. The pavilion master of Xiliang used fire to release the opposite coldness. Such a fire control technique was simply, Old Meng was completely stunned. He could no longer find any beautiful words to describe Qin Hao at this moment. Even the vice palace master of the sacred palace, Yang Tai, was extremely surprised. His eyes were filled with unconcealable excitement. If it weren't for his identity, he would have run up to Qin Hao, grabbed his hand and asked affectionately, "Are you willing to be old man's disciple?" Yu Qianyang naturally saw this subtle change in attitude. He subconsciously clenched his fists, and a strong sense of threat rose in his heart. Not only was Qin Hao's soul fire high, but his ability to control fire was also unimaginably strong. If Yang Tai really ran over and pulled Qin Hao into the sacred palace, he could indeed threaten his position as the son of Saint. At this moment, Yu Qianyang's eyes flashed with a flash of decisive killing intent. On the stage, the two of them were performing the 10,000 heavens together. The difference was that Qin Hao's 10,000 heavens were all filled with the power of fire. Then, the two heavens began an intense confrontation. Everyone felt as if they were watching a battle between gods. The result was that the music storm was extinguished when it met the fire, the towering mountain range was melted when it met the fire, and the thousands of rivers were swallowed by the lava river. Even the ice and snow melted in the flaming snowflakes. Chang Hello was completely defeated. Puff! Chang Hello spat out a mouthful of blood. He had overstimulated his Guqin spirit, and his soul power was suppressed by Qin Hao's red lotus. His face was pale and he staggered back. However, he still did not stop playing. His 5 fingers clasped the Guqin, and his face became crazy and ferocious. There was no longer any trace of nobility. His fingers loosened and 5 powerful sound waves shot out, penetrating the void and directly descending on Qin Hao's body. They turned into 5 huge scythe-shaped sound blades and coldly slashed down. At this moment, the huge sound blades split open the sea of fire and descended on Qin Hao's body. However, an even more vast crimson flame shot up from Qin Hao's body. With a sharp whistle, it smashed all the sound blades that were slashing down towards him into smithereens. "It's impolite not to reciprocate. I'll send you 5 as well," Qin Hao said. With a thought, he used his spiritual power to communicate with the soul fire. Swoosh! Swoosh! Chang Helo's expression changed. He waved his 10 fingers and played a crazy sound wave, trying to block the falling flame blade. However, there was no way he could block it. The red lotus flame blade sliced through his sound waves and hit Chang Helo. At that moment, a scream that sent chills down everyone's spine rang out from the stage. Chang Helo's white clothes were torn apart as he appeared in front of everyone with disheveled hair. 5 huge bloody wounds appeared on his body. One of them was on his face, making him look extremely miserable. However, Qin Hao controlled his strength very well. He only made his opponent look bad, and did not kill him. Otherwise, with the might of the Red Lotus tyrannical fire, how could Chang Helua still be alive? Even so, Chang Helua's pride had suffered an unprecedented blow and devastation. "If you had gone down just now, you wouldn't have learned your lesson," Qin Hao said in a calm tone, as if he had done something insignificant. This kind of tone was undoubtedly the most hurtful. If Chang Helo's Taoist heart was not strong, and he was one of the top geniuses in the southern region, he would have fainted on the spot. He barely held on. However, the faces of the disciples of the various sects were extremely ugly. If even Chang Helo was defeated, who in the southern region could defeat Qin Hao? Did they have to let Shou Wuk and Yu Qianyang fight? It was a great humiliation for them to fight against others. "Chang Helo, are you a good-for-nothing?" Yu Qianyang exploded. His voice was abrupt, and the anger in it was undisguised. If he really fought, wouldn't it mean that Qin Hao had the qualifications to be on par with him? Other than Shou Wuk, Yu Qianyang would not tolerate the existence of a second outstanding person, and he would not admit it. "Ah!" Chang Helo let out an extreme howl. His vitality forced into his abdomen, and he sprayed a mouthful of his heart's essence blood on his Guqin spirit. His Guqin spirit immediately released a terrifying light with a faint golden color. Golden color represented the monarch grade. The level 8 Yuan Venerate Changhe Lo had forced out his heart's essence blood. Clearly, he had been provoked by Yu Qianyang's good-for-nothing remark and was ready to unleash a killing move on Qin Hao. Sure enough, in the next second, his 10 fingers covered the strings of his guqin once again. Before the power of his essence blood dissipated, he played a terrifying sound wave that made one's heart palpitate. The sound wave was extremely ear-piercing and oppressive. It was clearly boundless. Then, everyone saw that in front of the sea of flames that had almost completely engulfed the arena, the terrifying sound wave condensed into a towering ancient god. This ancient god's body was incomparably tall, as if a deity had descended. Then, the ancient god punched the sea of flames. The wind generated by the punch was like a storm, causing the sea of flames to retreat instantly. Lesser monarch grade. Qin Hao had a grave look on his face. Chapter 1294. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' foot descends from the sky. The level 8 Yuan Venerate Changhe Lo possessed a source spirit that could rival a level 1 Yuan Venerate when he unleashed his full power. Now, he had sacrificed his blood essence and used some strange technique to temporarily raise his cultivation base to the quasi-emperor level. His true combat strength was no weaker than an ordinary level 3 Yuan Venerate. This method of overexerting one's strength would definitely leave behind repercussions, and the price might be extremely high. However, no matter what, the current Changhe Lo had a terrifying aura, and his cultivation base was far superior to his peers. This made the disciples of the various sects scream in fear. Qin Hao stared at the sea of flames that was retreating. The ancient god was unstoppable in front of the sea of flames. Qin Hao's current situation was that he was using the power of his half-deity body and the inextinguishable samsara art. His cultivation base was roughly at the level 3 Yuan Venerate level. To be precise, he was slightly weaker than the level 3 Yuan Venerate level. However, it was obvious that he couldn't suppress Changhe Lo, who had sacrificed his blood essence. Although he couldn't suppress him, the difference between the two of them wasn't that great. If Qin Hao activated his second dragon soul, even if he only used 10% of his dragon soul power, he could instantly reverse the situation and suppress Changhe Lo. However, he didn't want to do that. Trump cards were always a martialist's greatest secret. Many times, keeping one's own secret could save one's life when one least expected it. If Qin Hao wanted to win, he would have to use some martial techniques without using his second source spirit. Qin Hao nodded. He had made up his mind. In front of them, the ancient god stepped forwards with heavy steps, rushing towards Qin Hao with an insufferably arrogant air. As it stepped forwards, the sea of fire was forced back again and again. Everyone suddenly felt a sense of hope, as if unending river was about to counterattack. However, at this moment, Qin Hao opened his arms, and even more violent flames shot up into the sky. His enormous spiritual will merged into the sea of fire, and the sea of fire gathered around him, forming a huge tornado that rose into the sky. It was as spectacular as an erupting volcano. This tornado was filled with a boundless power that could destroy the heavens and earth. You are indeed outstanding, but this is the end of it. Qin Hao slowly raised his right arm. Just as the ancient god was about to reach him, his arm slashed down. Red Lotus Bursting Blade. Whoosh! The descending arm drew a dazzling arc of light. As the arc of light slashed out, the endless power of flames around Qin Hao merged into the arc of light. It was as if a 100-meter-long flaming blade was born out of thin air. It traversed the sky and slashed toward the ancient god. Zither, 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 violent zither music surged from the opposite shore. Changhe Lo was well aware that victory or defeat would be decided with this one strike. His soul power surged towards the ancient god in front of him, the sound waves increasing the ancient god's strength once more. The ancient god roared as the 100-meter-long flaming blade slashed down. He aimed at the void and blasted out an unparalleled fist aura. Rumble! With a deafening sound, it was as if the entire auction house was about to collapse. At this suffocating moment, the crowd watched in horror as the flaming blade split the ancient god's fist aura apart and entered its head, splitting its entire body into two. However, the power of the flaming blade had been unleashed to the extreme. As it destroyed the ancient god, it also disintegrated. Clang! The sound of a broken string resounded in the auction house. Changhe Lo's melody came to an abrupt end. Under his messy white hair, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His ragged body seemed to have suffered a merciless blow as it was thrown into the air. He had lost. He had been completely defeated. He had exhausted all of his abilities and should have been peerless in his generation. However, the sovereign's descent, the myriad manifestations of the heavens, and the 3 sacrifices of blood essence to transform into an ancient god were all suppressed by Qin Hao. He had exhausted his talents. However, the aftermath of the collision between the flaming blade and the ancient god was still there. It radiated toward the stage like a storm. It was the condensation of Qin Hao and Changhe Lo's peak fighting strength. It was extremely terrifying. Qin Hao was not injured at all, so naturally he could withstand it. Changhe Lo's zither string had been broken and his source spirit was heavily injured. It was clear that there was no possibility of him receiving it. Moreover, the speed of the aftermath was much faster than Changhe Lo's flying speed. His body was about to be swallowed up. Pavilion Master Qin's strength is indeed extraordinary. Then we will respectfully obey. According to what you said before, it's 3 against 1. Tang Xingqian, what are you still standing there for? Xianyuan Feng finally could not take it anymore. He loudly shouted and his face was filled with panic. His face was filled with uncontrollable fear. He was very clear that at this moment, Changhe Lo could not be knocked off the stage by Qin Hao. Changelua was clearly stronger than him. If he was the only one left, how could he be qualified to compete with Qin Hao? Only if the 3 of them worked together would they have a glimmer of hope. He took a step forward and released his gravity source spirit, blocking the aftermath of Changhe Lo's attack. Xianyuan Feng gathered his strength. At this moment, he did not hold back at all. Brother, be careful. I'll help you. Tang Xingqian came back to his senses and also moved. He flew towards Changhe Lo and placed his hands on his back, barely stopping him from flying back. At this time, a giant furnace source spirit appeared. It was surrounded by several fire dragons as it flew towards Qin Hao. Changhe Lo let out a strange, ear-piercing cry. His voice was very unpleasant to listen to. He was in an incomparably difficult situation. He took out the jade flute from before and blew out an incomparably wild sound wave. Along with the giant furnace, he also charged at Qin Hao. 8 times gravity, endless prison. Xianyuan Feng angrily roared. His palms were covered in blood. Just now, he had been injured by the aftermath of the battle. This made him deeply understand how terrifying Qin Hao was. Buzz. An earthy yellow halo spread around Xianyuan Feng's body and chased after the furnace in front of him. Together with the sound wave in the void, it descended upon Qin Hao's position. In an instant, the top geniuses of the southern region, the Herbal Elixir Hall, the Spirit Beast Sect, and the Xianyuan clan had been forced to work together. It wasn't that they were weak, but that Qin Hao was too strong. The disciples of the various sects were greatly shocked. No one had expected that the 3 people on the stage would really work together. In order to deal with a 3rd-level Yuan Venerate, 3 high-level Yuan Venerates had given up their dignity as geniuses. This was really shameless. K-Er was so angry that her face turned red as she stomped her foot on the ground. Before the battle had started, Her brother-in-law had said that the three of them should work together. However, at that time, Chang Hello, Xian Yuanfeng, and even Tang Xingchen of the Herbal Elixir Hall had all looked at Qin Hao with disdain. Was Qin Hao even worthy of that? However, things were different now. They had taken the initiative to work together. Their three souls had appeared in a very dignified manner. Even so, Big Brother still won't lose, Xiaogua said confidently. He knew Qin Hao's trump card very well. Regardless of whether it was against Tang Xingchen or Chang Hello, Qin Hao hadn't used his full strength at all. Furthermore, Xiaogua believed that even if the three of them worked together, Qin Hao still wouldn't use his full strength. Pavilion Master Shiliang is really fierce. Yeah, he sent Tang Xingchen flying with a single punch and crushed Chang Hello in 2 rounds. Xian Yuanfeng obviously saw that he wasn't a match for Qin Hao, so he took the initiative to work together. TSK, I'm afraid that even you Qianyang of the Sacred Hall and Shou Wuk of the Sword Sect have never seen such a grand lineup. Pavilion Master Shiliang is really honored today. Pavilion Master Qin's strength is extremely strong. Didn't you see that even Shou Wuk took the initiative to express his goodwill? Otherwise, how would he dare boast that he could suppress the southern region? I don't think there's anything wrong with the three of them working together. However, Pavilion Master Qin is deliberately keeping a low profile. It feels like he's bullying others. However, I'm afraid it will be extremely difficult for him to win this round. The disciples below the stage were discussing spiritedly. Previously, when Qin Hao had said that he could suppress the southern region, many people hadn't liked it and had been eager to challenge him. However, not many people had the guts to take the stage now. Furthermore, there were also some disciples who were secretly dissatisfied with Qin Hao. If everyone had known that Qin Hao was so strong, Chang Hello and the others would have joined forces right from the start. Strength was indeed the best proof. Before the fight, who would have thought highly of a third-level Yuan Venerate like Qin Hao? After the fight, even though he was only a third-level Yuan Venerate, his status had naturally been elevated and he had reached the same level as Shou Wuk and Yu Qianyang. Therefore, no one felt that it was shameful for 3 first-rate geniuses to join forces to fight a top-notch evildoer. No one cared about Xian Yuanfeng, as the cultivation base of any one of them was actually much higher than Qin Hao's. Instead, everyone felt that this was very reasonable. On the stage, the furnace whistled and the sound waves reverberated. A yellow storm followed closely behind. Qin Hao stood calmly with a slight smile. They had really joined forces, and they were still so confident. Qin Hao's eyes were cold. It was time to end this. Domain. Buzz. A layer of illusory purple light waves appeared and swept towards the three of them. As the light waves spread, the space seemed to have frozen. The furnace that was whistling towards them suddenly lost its momentum and slowed down like a snail, unable to move forward. Even the flames that were spitting out from the furnace were extinguished. Similarly, Chang Hello's sound waves broke into the domain and dissipated without a trace. The light waves of the domain overlapped with Xian Yuanfeng's gravity, causing it to lose its effectiveness. On the other hand, the bodies of Tang Xingchen and Chang Hello, who had broken in, suddenly stiffened. Their movements were restricted, as if their bodies had been frozen in place. Tang Xingchen also realized that his and the furnace's origin soul were faintly blocked by an invisible great path force and was about to lose control of his origin soul. Chang Hello even started to have difficulty breathing and could no longer play his flute smoothly. "Is this the strength of the three of you?" Qin Hao said. "Too weak. How can this be?" Xian Yuanfeng saw that Tang Xingchen and Chang Hello were restricted, while his gravity effect didn't seem to have any effect on Qin Hao. This was simply ridiculous. Dong. Right at this moment, Qin Hao made his move. For the first time, he took the initiative to attack. His feet shook the ground as his body soared into the air. He was like a majestic divinity, like an unshakable mountain, as he stomped down on Xian Yuanfeng's head. Xian Yuanfeng raised his head and his face was filled with incomparable horror. What kind of power was this? It penetrated his gravity area without any hindrance. Feeling the huge wind pressing down on his head, he wanted to dodge, but his body didn't listen to him. It was as if Xian Yuanfeng himself had fallen into his gravity area. He could only watch as Qin Hao's merciless feet stepped on his head. Crack! The sound of bones cracking. Qin Hao's feet shook Xian Yuanfeng's shoulders. Under the overwhelming pressure, the genius of the southern proud Xian Yuan family was trampled to the ground in front of everyone. He attacked quickly, but he didn't expect it to end even faster. Xian Yuanfeng didn't even have a chance to perform before he was consigned to eternal damnation by Qin Hao's foot. What prince? What top genius of the southern region? He couldn't withstand the power of a single foot. At this moment, the disciples of the various sects, including the seniors of the older generation, opened their mouths wide and their eyes popped out. Their expressions were filled with disbelief. That was the son of Xian Yuan Wuying, the most outstanding little grandson of the third generation of the Xian Yuan royal family. He was an existence that Xian Yuan Wuji looked up to. He was actually trampled to the ground by Qin Hao so coldly. Was the Western Liang Pavilion Master still a human? The Nine Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1295. Everyone was shocked by this scene. They thought that even though Qin Hao's talent was amazing, it would be extremely difficult for him to defeat Chang Helou and the other two when they joined forces. However, reality was cruel. The three chosen of the southern domain couldn't even withstand a single blow. Qin Hao leaped up into the air, stomping down with both feet. In the blink of an eye, Xian Yuanfeng was trampled to the ground. During this process, Chang Helou and Tang Xingqian were completely ignored. At this time, everyone recognized Qin Hao's strength again. When they thought back to the scene when he fought with Tang Xingqian and Chang Helou, perhaps Qin Hao didn't even use his full strength at that time. Those who were shocked were not only the ordinary disciples of the various sections. Yu Qianyang stood there in a daze, his eyes dull. Even he didn't expect Xian Yuanfeng to be so weak. Of course, with his ability, it was not difficult to defeat the three of them together. But it would not be as easy as Qin Hao. After the fight, Qin Hao's clothes were neat and clean, and there was not even a trace of injury. Artistic conception can't determine the level of one's strength? Qin Hao stepped on Xian Yuanfeng and looked at Yu Qianyang. Yu Qianyang's heart trembled violently several times, but he couldn't answer. What else could he say? Qin Hao fought Chang Helou twice and burned everything in the sky. His attainment was far above Chang Helou's. Of course, in terms of combat strength, Qin Hao was probably superior to his opponent. But at this time, any rebuttal seemed pale and powerless. The winner was always right. Thinking about it from another perspective, Chang Helou won, and the theory was also valid. However, Qin Hao openly confronted Yu Qianyang, obviously to help Shou Wuke maintain his point of view. I am willing to experience Pavilion Master Qin's fire artistic conception. Yu Qianyang's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Only by fighting could he prove himself. No time. Qin Hao flatly refused and didn't look at Yu Qianyang anymore. It was not that he was afraid of him, but that he was no match for Qin Hao. Perhaps Yu Qianyang was the same as Zhou Wudao. He could let Qin Hao experience the battle to his heart's content, but in the end, he couldn't change anything. Moreover, Qin Hao really didn't have the time. He was going to get Xiao Han back, so how could he have the time to waste time and energy on the juniors of the Southern Territory? Yu Qianyang was even more displeased. He didn't even have a chance to prove himself. Qin Hao didn't give him any face at all. This brother Qin is interesting. Shou Wuke shook his head and smiled. He was moved by Qin Hao's strength. However, His state of mind was open-minded, and it wasn't that he couldn't tolerate the existence of more outstanding people. If such a monster were to appear, they could work together. Then, Qin Hao looked at the Xianyuan family's camp and looked at Xianyuan Wuying. Dende could naturally feel the murderous intent that Xianyuan Wuying revealed before he went up to the stage. Perhaps in Xianyuan Wuying's heart, he thought that Xianyuan Feng could kill Qin Hao as easily as stepping on an ant. Now, seeing his son being trampled under someone else's foot with his own eyes, Xianyuan Wuying wondered how he was feeling. In the crowd, Xianyuan Wuji felt extremely bitter. He wasn't surprised by the result. However, seeing Xianyuan Feng being casually trampled to the ground by Qin Hao, he couldn't help but feel shocked. Qin Hao's strength was even stronger than when he was in the Emperor Martial competition. If he fought with Zhou Wudao again, Zhou Wudao's performance wouldn't be much better than Chang Helou's. At this moment, Xianyuan Wuji secretly glanced at his second uncle. Xianyuan Wuying's face was blank, as if he had lost his soul. It could be seen that witnessing his son being stepped on by someone else was a huge shock. However, he had previously told Xianyuan Wuji that he wanted to witness Xianyuan Feng's talent in gravity. His son's talent was unparalleled in the family, and he was a role model for others to learn from. It was a rare opportunity. Could it be that this was the way to let people learn? Learn how to be stepped on? Impudent! Suddenly, the dazed Xianyuan Wuying came to his senses. He glared at Xianyuan Wuying and roared, "How dare you!" Xianyuan Wuba's response was even sharper. He released his emperor's intent, crushing the void and rushing toward the stage like a river bursting through a dam. At the same time, at least 5 or 6 equally powerful emperor's intents were released from the outside, forming arrows in the void and colliding heavily with Xianyuan Wuba's law of gravity. This battle was witnessed by everyone. Before the competition, Qin Hao had stood out and invited the other seniors of the 3 sovereigns and 4 sects to be witnesses. Now, Xianyuan Wuba had broken the rules and wanted to attack Qin Hao. He was looking down on the other emperor-level experts. If they didn't stop him, they wouldn't have the face to stay in the southern region. Li Yaxu, Luo Ho, Duanmu Qinghui, Ning Hongxian, Meng Xiang. You! Xianyuan Wuba took 2 steps back, his face flushed. In terms of individual strength, he might be the top existence present. However, facing 5 or 6 emperor-level experts and a half-step Yuan emperor, he still couldn't bear it. Xianyuan Wuba, you've gone too far. Meng Xiang, who was elder Meng of the Sword Sect, said coldly. Do you have any shame? Luo Ho's face was full of smiles as he rubbed his big bald head with his thick hand. Beside him, Luo Yuliang chuckled. The rules have been set in advance, so we should do things according to the rules. Pavilion Master Qin has won. Li Yaxu and Ning Hongxian looked at each other. Suddenly, the atmosphere of the scene was unusually tense. Everyone was shocked. Qin Hao really dared to make a move. Xianyuan Wuying's eyes were anxious, and he subconsciously took a step forward. Xianyuan Feng was his most outstanding son and his only son. The higher the cultivation of a cultivator, the more difficult it was to give birth. He was more than 100 years old this year and was about to enter the imperial realm. There wasn't much hope for him to have a second heir. Xianyuan Feng was his everything. However, Xianyuan Wuba raised his arm and blocked in front of Xianyuan Wuying. His cold eyes were filled with the ruthlessness of an emperor. He stared at Xianyuan Feng under Qin Hao's palm and said, Feng, are you afraid of death? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.